It looks like he's coming on him, Richard.
All right, we're back. We're in it. Bottom Dead Center show here on the OSMT YouTube channel, Season 2, Episode 1. And you know what? We're going to get through this episode and we're going to make the most of it as best as we can. But you're going to notice a little more somber and a little more serious of a tone tonight on Bottom Dead Center, excuse me, than what we normally would put out there, being the apparently the Capitol storming bearded assholes that we all look like. Anyways. We're rambling tonight. It's Bottom Dead Center, Season 2, Episode 1. We're back. We took a little break. I say we took a break for the summer. In reality, we all just worked like crazy at our, let's say, real life obligations. But before we get into the show, and trust me, we have a lot ahead for you tonight. We got a lot to catch up on. We've changed our format around a little bit because of, a needed change we had to make with the tone and topic of this episode. But first off, before we get into the important messaging here, I'll introduce my co-host this evening. OSMT, Bottom Dead Center, really co-founder, Matt Looker, coming to us from New York State tonight. Plug in the round of applause sound there. Yay! So, Matt, you're up in Albany land, nearby still right now, I assume?
I am. Tonight I am in Albany. In between trips, like always, it feels like you said, the summer maybe was off from BDC, but was not off in personal life. But yeah, coming to you from beautiful upstate New York tonight.
It's a shame we spent all the money on that Tahitian resort with the OSMT logo up on the side of the building, and then none of us were able to fly out and use it this summer. What a waste. And from the most Tahiti-like place on the map of the three of us, welcome back, Justin Moessinger.
Hello.
So Justin coming to us from the Tampa St. Pete area, which, as I say, compared to Wyoming and upstate New York, is far and away the most Tahitian of the three destinations you can choose from tonight. So welcome back, Justin. Thanks for jumping in with us on short notice. So everyone knows, our good buddy Frank Krimmel is en route from Cleveland to somewhere in Wisconsin, I think. He may be calling in later from the Tulachka Racing Operation compound, we are to understand, but he's underway right now. And Iceman and I will be filming some stuff, hopefully in the coming week or two, as we work on getting him back on the show. So it's a full house in spirit. Cody Saucier, we're hoping to hear from him sometime soon as well, too. He's got some thoughts he's going to be sharing with us here on BDC early in the season. So, like I said, we're a full house in heart and soul, but we're also hurting in heart and soul this week. And, of course, you'd have to be living under a proverbial rock to not have heard the news that on Friday, September 5th, 2025, we lost somebody extremely important to all of us, whether we were fans, competitors, teammates, friends, family. We lost, of course, Dan Runte, legendary driver and vice president, I believe it is, of Bigfoot 4x4 Incorporated. I don't even know how you put a job title on Dan at this point. I mean, savant, god tier, monster truck Mount Rushmore face. So guys, I, took a call, from Jim back in St. Louis on Friday, and he shared that information with me, and certainly wasn't the call I was expecting, and it was not the news any of us were expecting. And we're going to pay tribute to Dan tonight. The second half of the show, the Roundtire Discussion, we're going to pay tribute to Dan tonight. If you go to, by the time you're watching this, I hope you've already seen it on the OSMT Instagram or our YouTube channel. I've kind of been holed up in the downstairs OSMT dungeon at my house here, working away with the help of people like Justin and Chris Mormanis and Matt Stoltz and everybody that's helped me, Jack Meredith. And we've put together an OSMT tribute video to Dan that exceeded my amateurish video editing skills, but we had to do our part. I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but I would like to think, as well as I was at least able to know Dan, I don't think he'd want us moping around a hell of a lot. I think he'd want us, remembering him, remembering positive memories about him and cherishing those things and sharing those things and cussing and telling stories and making fun of each other and drinking Captain Morgan's and Coke. So that's what's in my tumbler tonight. That was a ramble from me, as I'm prone to doing at the start of these shows. But boys, real quick, give me a couple thoughts each from you, on Dan and the passing of Dan real quick, and then we'll get into the format of our show as we had scheduled. And like I said, in the second half of the show, we'll get in a little bit deeper.
Matt, you want to go?
Sure. Like you said, Mount Rushmore face for monster trucks, I think hits the nail on the head. Even new school fans, unless you're purely just Monster Jam, you know who Dan Runte is. One of the few guys that really bridged the gap from true old school to also being able to clean up new school, from running Bigfoot 2 when he first started, all the way to running Bigfoot 21 and winning championships, including freestyle, not just racing. That's where the new school comes into play on toughest, which could arguably be one of the hardest winter indoor championships to win. Just full circle. A guy that you always love to see. Kind of an infectious smile. I don't know. That's one thing I always remembered about him. He always had a real, a smile, even though he wasn't that fake nice type of guy. He definitely could have those grumpy times, but he was just a good time to have him around, and just a true legend in the sport.
Real quick, so I don't forget, you said about his smile and his attitude. It's because he was real, right? Dan was never fake.
100%.
And somebody might say, yeah, but everybody says he could turn it on, to be nice to the fans, even if he was having a bad day. That was still real Dan, because that's how much Dan cared about the fans. But what I really wanted to say is what you said about his smile. And I sent you guys the video from our hotel room in LA back in 2013 when Dan and Larry Swim, Darren Snell, myself, I think Tim Mazenis and Danny Moss might have been in the room. But I'm glad I have that video still, because Dan's laugh that went along with his smile, he had this laugh that would just ski slope up in loudness. It was kind of like that. But it was such a happy laugh. It was so just like him. Unique, and it was all his own. So, Justin, throw a couple words about Dan our way, if you would.
I mean, what hasn't been said the last few days, man? I got to meet Dan very, very briefly at the 2018 open house. Just a quick little thing, because he was running around making everything freaking work. But you could still see he would take time for the fans, sign something, hey, how you doing? Good to see you again, all that kind of stuff. And like you said, he's just a genuine guy. I said a genuine guy, champion, just all around good soul.
Well, I think those are great words to get us off on the right foot tonight. I'm not feeling better, but I'm feeling better. You know what I mean? How can monster trucks be so well universally known in pop culture, but yet no one outside of our little niche industry really gets us, right? I was trying to explain to a coworker, today, we already talked about work stuff tomorrow, one of my fellow managers, and it's just so you know, man, I'm still trying to, keep my brains from being totally scrambled. I'm dealing with some stuff, and I know his words are genuine to me. He was like, man, I'm really sorry to hear that. That's got to be really tough. And it's I don't know if you get it. You know what I mean? And it doesn't mean he can't understand grief or anything like that. It's just you really have to be a certain kind of person to like and operate within and to understand. And certainly in Dan's case, to make a lifelong career out of this industry. So the person we lost with Dan wasn't just really good at what he did. I mean, he was what he did in so many ways, and what he did was the way it was because of him, as cheesy or weird as that might sound. So, hugely important person, but feeling a little bit better as we talk about him. And now we're going to slide into the regularly scheduled part of our program, where we're going to try and lighten the mood a little bit for a little while. But Looker and I had this idea earlier in the summer that once we went on summer break, and I don't know, Looker, that you were as hardcore of a Top Gear Grand Tour fan as what I still am. But I love those episodes where the new season would start off, and the crowds surrounding, the three hosts in the big warehouse building, and Jeremy Clarkson's like, right, and here's a preview of what you can expect over the next 12 weeks. Okay, well, we don't have a preview of what you can expect over the next 12 weeks because we mainly deal in the last minute here and now or in shit that happened 30 or 40 years ago. So I can't preview a lot. What I can tell you, with the help of one of our favorite East Coast punk bands, the Bouncing Souls, this is how we spend our summer vacation. That was a pretty adventure-packed. What was it? Did we even take 2 whole months off? I don't know. It was like roughly 2 whole months. But like you said, Looker, we didn't really take time off, per se.
That's right.
But I think you, hands down, win the most exciting summer, in my opinion. And we'll talk a little more about Throwdown stuff in detail a little later. But you got to tell us, that was you driving Bush Hog there, Elliot Miller's truck. So tell us, what was it like cranking the hog? And also, what was it like being at those semi side-by-side, like pulls, drags, whatever you want to call them?
Man, they say you...
standard European grip.
What's that?
Yeah. What grip do you crank a hog with, typically?
Standard or European?
Standard. Sometimes you get the stranger, you sit on her for a minute, you know.
Yeah. I can't feel my rear steering hand.
That's how you like it sometimes. Anyways, So Elliot told me one day, we're at Grays Lake, Illinois. I built the track and was doing the show. And he's like, "You're going to drive the truck this afternoon." I'm like, "Oh, okay." I mean, I'm not going to say no to that. So,
Right.
I drove the Frontier Truck Parts Bush Hog Throwback truck. It was it's a great working truck, a lot of power. Elliot and other people drive it. You know, they put on a great show with it. So I knew that if I sucked doing it, it would be because of me, not because of the truck. Land's great, which if you've ever been in a truck, you know that is your back's going to thank you if you have a truck that lands great. But it was very cool. I'd driven a truck before, but never hit any big stuff. It was more the higher RPMs and, you know, hitting like 2-3 foot tall jumps, but hit a couple stacked up cars. He was pointing me towards the school bus with the step up, but we had a show that night and I didn't want to totally yard sale the truck with a show like 3 hours later. So hitting a few race lanes and a few of the medium-sized freestyle obstacles was fun. Just a lot of fun, you know. It definitely gives you more respect for those trucks the more that you drive them, I think. You've driven way more than me. I don't know if you felt that way. I feel like the more that I drive, the more respect you have for the truck.
Well, I think it's one of those things where the more you know, then the more you realize what you don't actually know.
Correct.
You know, I watched your videos multiple times over there, both in the editing process of that little montage, but just kind of seeing how you were doing because I care, you know, as a friend and coworker, let's say. But two things that really jumped out at me is one, your throttle rhythm in the air and things like that, and just not panicking. So like so many times you see a celebrity guest drive a monster truck or something, and best case scenario, they seem to just let out of the gas all the way, you know, even in a small jump. Worst case scenario, they keep it pegged to the floor or they hit the brakes, or, you know, leaving the ground with a new or first time driver is usually not what you want to see. And that's what we normally see. I feel like obviously you're not a first time driver and you've been around this stuff for so long. What you reminded me of is what I said. Maybe it was in our season finale where Justin and I were on together, where I talked about just driving Bigfoot 11 around in the parking lot for the first time. And you get in there, and even though you're not a good driver, at that point I wasn't, you don't feel out of place. Nothing feels alien to you because you're like, well, I've been watching this stuff my whole life. This is all I care about. Nothing feels alien to me. So I imagine some of that is what you experienced getting in there, because you did not look like you were trying to find your way around the monster truck itself, its controls, or the track surface you were on. But I loved your turns. I was really stoked about that. You were smooth. You were fluid. You didn't overdrive anything. You know, the little bit that the truck wanted to kind of understeer on you, I mean, you compensated for everything really well on that. So there's other people I'd rather race in the first round than you. I'll say that.
I appreciate that. And I will say that, you know, everyone's their harshest critic. At least I think that's a good quality when you're your harshest critic. If I had more time or whatever, I probably would have adjusted the throttle pedal further out. There's a few too many RPMs in the air where I was consciously thinking when I left the ramp, okay, do not land on the throttle. And I just couldn't quite get my foot back enough. And every time that I blipped the throttle, it was just a little too much RPMs. But, you know, I knew where I was at the whole time. And like you said, with the turns, keeping enough momentum and enough speed, because it does have a locker in the front. So you can't just come to a stop and steer the wheel. You got to be a little fluid with it. And then it was kind of fun to like kick the rear steer, grab the brake and slide it a little bit. But yeah, it was just a good time. And I felt like I didn't look terrible. But
I can tell you were forklift certified with the way you handled the rear steer.
Yes, exactly. Power up on the mast.
That's right. Yeah. So what about the semi-truck action we saw in there? So I was going to have some semis in there as well. We were supposed to go to the circle track last night down in Colorado and watch some big rig oval racing that was touring through. And obviously with everything going on, it didn't really feel like a night to go to the track. But I'm super jealous of what I saw from you right there. Those are some of the most famous, you know, truck videos you see on YouTube with those souped up semis just twisting and flexing and pulling wheels off the ground. And were you announcing? Were you spectating? Like, tell us what was going on there.
So 2 years ago with Throwdown, we did a show at the Onaway Speedway, which is where this takes place. It's one of two places in the States that does these uphill semi-loaded truck pulls, drag racing. And we did a show at the circle track, which is literally 100 feet from the drag strip that shared the banking for it is where you sit in the grandstands. And the track owner, Mike, said, "Hey, what are you doing Labor Day weekend?" And I was like, well, I got a show that weekend. He's like, well, I need an announcer for that deal. I was like, oh man, I wish. But next year. So this year was next year, last year. That's a lot of, past and present tense. But, so I made sure I made sure I was good this year, and we went up. They have 2 events a year. This one was the over the top diesel challenge. The one day they have, diesel pickups, but other than that, it's all just semis. There's 3 different classes from your work trucks, which still put on a pretty good show, up to Class A are the pretty much unlimited. You can blow as much smoke as you want, which is a limiting factor in Class C, not to get too technical. You can have as big as a turbo as you want. And yeah, I was the announcer for it. It was 8 hours about per day, so I feel like I earned my keep. It was 2 days, 8 hours a day of pretty much consistent straight racing, and yeah, just some of the coolest stuff you could see, and that's from someone like all of us that deal with monster trucks. Just seeing the chassis twist, the cab twist when they come off the line, while they've got 100,000 pounds behind them, roasting all 4 drive axles coming off the line, going uphill, is just really cool. And one of the, I bet some of our listeners, viewers will have seen the little accident with the needle nose Pete. That was actually the track owner, Mike, on the Friday night or Saturday night show. Race, should call it a race. It's purely racing there. Not like a monster truck show where it's about showing off. Yeah.
And now for some quad wars.
Exactly. He's racing a Mac, and he gets off the line and it goes to the right, and he lets out of it at the exact last minute before he runs into the wall. And when he lets off and gets back on, it just goes the complete opposite way. Mike's a good driver. He's been doing it a long time, and it just got the best of him for a little bit. It happens. There were a lot of negative comments about it, but in reality, no one got hurt. Mike owns the trailers, the truck, and the racetrack, and I guarantee if he caused any damage to the other truck, which he didn't, he ended up hitting the trailer, he would have paid for that truck to be fixed. So I bet some of our viewers have seen that kind of little accident. That happened on the Saturday night deal. But yeah, just a lot of real great racing and a lot of super nice trucks. I mean, a lot of older pieces that were restored that still race, like a bunch of cab over Fords, actually. A bunch of Fords. There was even a Dodge, an old day cab Dodge, 74, I think it was.
Oh, wow.
That ran just really cool trucks.
Some of those pictures you sent, dude, like there was a LTL 9000 Ford, I think, in one of those pictures you sent me, dude, and I'm like, oh, need a minute. Switching to European grip here.
Total of about 10,000 people throughout the weekend. Most of them are related to the racers, but people came in from 10 countries just to see that. And the one in May that they have is actually even bigger than that, because there were 2 other events in Quebec that were going on the same day, so it drug some of the competitors away. But yeah, it's a big deal, and just a lot of fun. I'm real glad I was able to be a part of it. And they're a big family, just like the monster truck industry is. You know, they treated me real well. I had a great time. It was hoping to go back next year.
That's amazing, dude. I think it totally changes your approach to announcing and talking to the people when you have an extended time to fill and to commentate on and things like that. It's hard to not run out of things to say or go to the well or things like that. I've never announced that type of motorsports, but I've definitely announced a variety of even non-motorsports events that took a lot out of me, for an 8 or 10 hour day of like, how the hell am I supposed to, there's no jumps. The fuck am I supposed to talk about?
Right.
So that's harder than people think. If you have any knowledge of monster truck stuff, then I think monster trucks are actually some of the easiest types of events to announce, truthfully. Proof of that being I made a career for a while as a monster truck announcer. So
yeah,
I'm not saying I was a good one, but I was one. So, Justin, your summertime. I know a couple things kind of jumped out at me, but it looks like you guys went to some sort of You did not. Let's just say this way: you were visiting an underwater type exhibit, and you did not use the world's first one-way submersible, the Titan A1C, right? Anybody out there follows English humor, they got that joke, I think. But yes, no one-way submersibles, for single-use submersibles.
I've got controllers to control the thing. I just don't have one.
I do too, actually. I need to turn my Xbox off. I have old NASCAR races playing in the background, hence all the flashing lights. So while you tell us about your summer vacation, I'm going to turn off my TV.
Summer vacation was good. Like I said, really, I didn't have one. The only one that really had one, of course, was my son. And we just hung out. We took him to the Florida Aquarium for his birthday.
What the fuck is that?
Yeah, went over to my parents' house and did the swimming and grilling thing.
Not simultaneously, right? Or do they have a floating charcoal grill? Florida's fucking crazy, so I don't know.
Not this time. Not this time.
I call it the burger barge. What do you want?
But yeah, I mean, just hung out. I started a new position at work recently, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
And a shitload of work on the Bigfoot History Archive, I should point out.
Yes. Kyle gave me a batch, and a considerably large batch of stuff to sort through, and I just finished it here within the last week. So now I'm going back through the 1990s schedule, and I'm coloring in all the truck names and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know. I've still been thinking about. I hope no one thinks that we forgot, because we didn't. About what the hell we're gonna do with this one of these days.
That's a great question. I think we're gonna have to build a website with a searchable database on it at some point.
Yeah, it's either gonna be that and yeah.
This could turn into the greatest crowdsourced database ever, though. If we start to open it up to beyond just Bigfoot history, which, I mean, through the 80s and 90s, I mean, if we can lock down a show in 1993 that Bigfoot was at, then that helps us understand already, using pictures and stuff, what other trucks were there, and it starts to open up a broader story, and a broader palette.
I've had those same thoughts too, because there's been parts where I kind of feel bad that it's 100% Bigfoot centric. Somewhat.
We'll get Leadfoot fans. We'll get there. Okay, we will have a Leadfoot history drive eventually.
5 to 7% feel bad, but no, like I said, I have had that thought too, because at least, I mean, I'm sure there's guys out there like Dennis or Dan Patrick or like Alan Pesos that might have old schedules and things like that, but I don't know if there anything is anywhere near as extensive, especially for how long Bigfoot was in the spotlight up until 1998 with the split and everything like that. But you can pretty much use Bigfoot from 1975 to 1998 as far as where your other favorite trucks were. And yeah, it's kind of been like a compass in that way.
And think about the potential when we start getting into other trucks too. Like I joke about Leadfoot. I mean, Leadfoot gives us a great opportunity to break right out of the gate, break things down by did the wheel fall off, yes or no, and then I can help you get further and more detailed on what you're looking at. Like, I have this picture of Leadfoot
by saying break things down with Leadfoot.
Yeah, let's break things down. Yeah, like not trying to send us off on a loose wheel tangent here, but no, like you hand me a picture of Leadfoot. I don't know where this photo was taken. My grandpa took it. All right, are all four wheels attached? No. Okay, great. Let's go to this folder and we'll start sorting from here. So I want to bounce around to a couple monster truck relevant topics. Obviously the industry didn't stop just because we took a small pause, here at OSMT in Bottom Dead Center. But, first off, and I'm not going to go too deep into this because I'm not super close to, the people involved and understanding everything happening with the story. But, Marty Garza of Overkill fame had a bit of a health episode, I guess, let's say, a number of months ago, and was not exactly doing super well. And, his family had actually posted an update that some various people had sent me, the screenshots of, because I'm not connected to them necessarily on social media. But what the gist I got of it was, and I sure hope I have this, right, and it's all being said in good faith, but the gist was that Marty's condition was starting to actually round a corner. Obviously, he was getting, spectacular care, not only from his family, but from all of his medical professionals. And that, his likelihood of making a more full recovery than what the initial prognosis called for has swung back, in Marty's favor, which anyone that's ever encountered Marty knows he's an incredibly, erudite guy, very smart person. He's got a immense, history in the sport. Lord knows him and I have had different opinions on stuff and shared opinions on stuff in the past. But the most important thing is he's a really important part of the monster truck industry's past and present, of course. So the fact that we were hearing, some positive news coming out about Marty Garza's condition, made me super, super happy. So the hope is to learn a little more on that and, bring you some updates in the future as we understand them. But I can tell you, I would love to have Marty on. I mean, he's written what is really, as far as I can tell, hands down, the best, book ever on the subject of monster trucks. Certainly the only technical guide, I would say, with any sort of legitimacy on monster trucks. So I think, those are important things that we want to keep in mind and keep especially with what just happened with Dan and, the tough headspace that we're all operating in right now. We want to make sure that, we're celebrating people like him that are fighting the good fight right now, regaining their health. So, that's important to us there. And then also saw, we missed, of course, the Charlotte Monster Truck Back to School Bash at the dirt track at Charlotte. Friend of the show and previous guest, Brian Manson. He's one of the brain trusts behind what is arguably it's got to be the biggest monster truck event outdoors. Maybe not in terms of truck count, let's say, and it's not part of a series or necessarily a crowning championship. So it is a standalone event, but it's got to be, how would you not recognize it as being the biggest standalone monster truck event in the industry? But it's beyond a world finals grade track out there. And I'm not putting Monster Jam down, but we fret and fuss over the track details of what they built in Salt Lake City. And meanwhile, for well over a decade, Brian's been building, honestly, the most extreme monster truck courses in Charlotte. And Looker, I'll kind of throw it to you because you're closer to that whole group of people than I am. But I would not call it a surprising fact that we had a double down winner there at Charlotte, but an incredibly hard accomplishment to pull that off, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. First, I want to backtrack just for a second to comment on that event before I comment on the double down winner. So I've done that show a couple times. Like you said, I work with Brian and them guys. That is truly the first event and the only one since that I've worked at where after racing, from a fan's perspective, you can say, we're good. We don't need to do freestyle. Freestyle is obviously cool, and you see at that particular event, you saw some cool stuff in freestyle, but the racing is just so extreme, like you said. The track is so ridiculous. It's from a video game that when the racing is done, you feel like you've seen a complete show because there's so much big air. The track is so ridiculous. To say it's a bucket list item would be an understatement, I think. And I'm counting myself very lucky just to have worked at it a couple times. And now moving to little John Zimmer Jr., double downing. Every time he goes out, every year that passes, he becomes one of the top shoes in monster trucks, I feel like. His dad is right. I almost want to say his dad's right behind him because Little John just seems to take the limelight everywhere he goes. But as I personally saw, and any Throwdown fan saw this summer, the old man's still got it, and he'll whoop the kid every once in a while just to show he's still got it. But yeah, Zimmer Jr. taking the racing. Yeah.
Refresh me, what trucks do they drive again?
So Zimmer Jr. is terminal velocity, And then
Yes.
Seniors Uproar, the Super Duty.
Okay, yeah. No, I saw them recently in Tampa.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, he does great. Monster Jam, Throwdown, the Back to School Bash, everywhere they go. He's the class of the field. And it's not surprising that he would double down at this event. Some really awesome freestyle moves as well as racing. Coming off of last year's racing win, where he didn't double down because he yard sailed the truck in racing. After Dalton and Jurassic Attack had already crashed, in a real racer mindset, he was not going to lift on the last straightaway. This was last year. The rear steer kicked, and he ended up cartwheeling the truck after the finish line. Just kind of the mindset of those guys, like they're gonna put it to the wood no matter what's going on. But yeah, just unsurprising, but also very cool to see him double down at that bucket list show that, like you said, for a decade has been, with no disrespect to Monster Jam, it puts their World Finals racing track to shame, really. I think that's fair to say. It puts everyone's racing track to shame.
I think you have to have, like, if you look at this year's Monster Jam World Finals after they unfuckulated the racetrack where they had, turned that one turn into a slip and slide on the hill for guys like Cody. And I will die on that slip and slide covered hill that they hosed some of their drivers, not intentionally, but they definitely hosed them by hosing down the track as much as they did anyways. You can get around, flat turns or utilize some of those bank turns well in Monster Jam. I think you've got a great chance of going rounds, right? Charlotte, on the other hand, is a whole nother discipline of monster truck racing. It's at a whole nother level. I mean, it's a crown jewel event. I think if you were a guy like Little Zimmer, who has the ability to run at or get booked into a variety of shows across a lot of the big promoters, I mean, this kid could go out, any given year if the stars align and win what I would call, all of the crown jewel events in monster trucks right now. He could win Monster Jam World Finals. He could win Back to School Bash in Charlotte. He could win Monsters on the Beach in Virginia Beach. He could win, one of Elliott's big shows like Fowlerville or Mount Pleasant or something like that. And that's just, I mean, what a good feeling it has to be, not only to be him, but just to be his dad, knowing you've raised such a weapon in that truck as a driver that, I mean, him and that truck are in contention no matter who you throw at him and what kind of track you put him on.
And I want to mention one thing. One of the cool things I always liked about the Charlotte track is they've changed it a little bit every year, not drastically, but there's always little changes, where the starting line is, whether the finish line is on the front stretch or the back stretch, but it really is a very even track because both drivers run both lanes. It's a over-under track, and you switch lanes in the middle of the track. So even if one lane was wet or whatever had ruts in it, you're both going to run that lane once. And it also makes for a very long racing track. But it's very even for that reason. So all that stuff you were saying about the Monster Jam track, the one turn really hosing those competitors, that doesn't factor in at Charlotte because you run both lanes essentially every time that you run there.
Well, and Brian's good with dirt too. You can, as a monster truck racer, no matter how extreme the track is, you can still trust that, Brian has competitive fairness, safety, and quality performance still in mind on the track. So pretty spectacular stuff right there. I mean, go on YouTube, check out the videos. There's some great, full show recaps that people have done on there, and it was some spectacular stuff. I mean, one of Dan Runte's, biggest wins of his late career came at Charlotte. I believe, was that 2019? Looker, does that sound right? When Stone Crusher about took him out. I mean, there's footage, and I'll drop it in here. But Dan is coming up to launch, off of a bus type jump in racing, and whoever was driving Stone Crusher, it might have been Steve or Steven, I don't remember, gets out of shape and ends up like driving up towards Bigfoot the wrong way up the ramp and almost makes contact with Dan. And Dan sees it, knows he's coming, doesn't flinch, doesn't try and adjust the trajectory of the truck at the last second, put the trucker himself in danger of, twisting or moving in the air or landing bad. He just fires her right down there, cool as a cucumber, and goes on to win the race. And that's I mean, that's some show-stopping shit right there, you know?
I think that's 2017.
Was it 17? Okay.
I think so,
Yeah.
because I think
Wow.
Garrett and 19 were at 18 and 19.
Okay, gotcha. So, and I think one of those years, even Bigfoot was a D and Q. So, I mean, it speaks to how hard that track is to compete on. I mean, I'm sure in 14 I'd have been an easy D and Q, and then would have had to go out early and freestyle at a place like that. So, it speaks to Dan's ability hugely on that. Lastly, just general monster truck topics. The Monster Jam 2026 schedule release has already happened. They've laid out, who's on arena tours and who's on stadium tours, and the fan base and all of their wisdom has tried making sense of it in many a comment section. And debates and controversy have ensued. The only thing I'm going to bitch about is I want Cody and Weston on stadium tours. And now I've said my piece. If there's anything else you guys want to add, have at it.
That's I will say, and I agree with that. I think a special shout out to Chucky Pauken III getting his Monster Jam debut season coming up with Classroom Crusher.
Nice.
He's teamed up with Kylie. So Brett Falvey did a great job with the truck, the chassis that ran as Haymaker all this year. Going to be running his Classroom Crusher for Monster Jam. Brett stepped back to spend some more time with family, so Chucky, who's been crewing for them, is going to be driving. And anybody that's seen Chucky the Third drive, he drives off and on again. I predict that he'll be on Zimmer's level in not a very long time. At that Grays Lake show where I drove Elliot's truck, Chucky drove for Kylie in her chassis. So a chassis that he'd never driven before, and he hadn't driven in a year, and he swept everything that he competed in dominating fashion. So I really think he'll be a dark horse to watch in the whole of Monster Jam coming up this first quarter, or half a year as it pretty much is now.
Well, at least we don't have any. We're completely unbiased on Bottom Dead Center, and we have no favorites other than Cody Saucier and John Zimmer Jr. and CB3. So as long as we continue to present fair and unbiased coverage of the monster truck industry without any favorites or professional biases, we'll be fine, right?
Right. The Fox News fair and unbiased chat here.
Yeah. Hey, join Fox Nation for only $19.95 a month. It's all right. I'm sure we'll all be invited on a show with Scott Jordan hosting before we know it, because we're cool.
Yes.
Man.
Absolutely.
All right. Shots fired at ourselves here. That's okay. Looker, give us a quick rundown on Throwdown. You guys have had a busy summer. You've had some kick-ass action happening at some of those shows. Obviously, the biggest and some would say the best driving that's ever happened on the series happened while you were driving, Matt. Cranking that hog, that beautiful. Some would say it was the best looking hog that ever hogged. But Looker, tell us about the rest of the tour.
Yeah, don't judge a man until you've cranked a mile on his hog. But yeah, so Throwdown is
We're
Throwdown is
talking about the Bush Hog monster truck,
right.
So, Looker, 16 trucks. You couldn't get a 16, like one more. You couldn't make one more.
Yeah,
truck.
I know. When you got a fairground show that you're having 15 trucks at, the budget doesn't quite allow you to put an extra truck in just for round number sake or even number sake.
Parking lot was full. The parking lot was full.
Yeah, the parking lot was full of the haulers. Actually, we couldn't have any fans parked.
Yeah.
No.
Three shows a day for 3 days to make the bank, right?
Yeah, pretty much. But no, so we had 15 trucks. We qualified 8, and the 7 trucks that didn't qualify we did a little bit different format. We called it a best trick variety show, and we sent out like two guys that were good at 2-wheel skills. We sent them out, and actually for the Saturday night show, it ended up being 4 trucks that all went out. All at once and did 2-wheel maneuvers. We had Elliot and Psycho Circus go out and follow the leader, slap wheelies. It was a good time. That was our biggest show of the year by far. We had Edmonton was a good time. That's always one of our biggest shows. We got 2 more here coming up. St. Ignace at the Cuting Casino in almost the UP. It's just over the Mackinac Bridge. That's next weekend, this coming weekend, I should say, because it's Sunday. And then we got Slinger Speedway the week after, our high bank figure 8 racing, which is always a good time. So yeah, Throwdown's been winding
great
down.
Facility.
Yes.
I was just going to say, Slinger is a great facility, man. I mean, if you watch Circle Track Racing on Flow or any of those, you're probably familiar with Slinger Speedway, and your guys' shows there always look really awesome.
Yeah, it's always a good time. We got some new owners in this year, and we're looking forward to working with them. But like I said, it's one of our figure 8 shows. I always love doing side-by-side figure 8. I don't know, it's just something a little old school, kind of cool racing. We run them side-by-side up on the 33 degrees of banking there, which is kind of intense as it is. It makes for a cool visual when the trucks are coming around side-by-side on that kind of banking. So yeah, just the 2 shows left for us, and we'll call her a wrap for Throwdown season. It's been a good one, as always. I know, like you guys were saying, you didn't take the year off or the summer off, even though BDC was off. I've been working full-time at home pretty much and doing these shows pretty much every week. I get about 1 day off a month during the summer, it seems like, but, it's a good time.
That's kind of how, I guess I didn't really, not that anybody cares, I didn't really talk about my summer vacation as it was, but I'm in a boat similar to both of you. I have aspects of both of your summers, and like you just said, Looker, I mean, we weren't off. We knew we couldn't focus any attention hardly on this passion pursuit of ours with, as busy as work gets. In your case, you're kind of working 2 jobs, right? You're a some kind of brain surgery doctor, I gather, by day, or an air ambulance helicopter pilot, or something like that.
Something like that. One of those.
Working labor and delivery in the rhinoceros pen at the Albany Metropolitan Zoo, and I, of course, I just had a flashback to an Ace Ventura movie for some reason. I picture you out there, like, come on, you're gonna have to push it. That thing ain't coming out.
Getting hot.
I take off for pizza at 12, so yeah, it gets hot. But in my case, the beer business, of course, peak of the summer, busiest time of year for us. We're the presenting beer sponsor for so many large events, like I've mentioned, Cheyenne Frontier Days, things like that. So some of the footage you saw in there were just weird things or shenanigans or cool stuff I noticed or got to partake in while we were out there. They have yet to recruit Iron Maiden to play at Frontier Days, so my attention span remains 100% intact. I'd settle for Tyler Childers and Sturgill Simpson, frankly. I'd be quite happy with that. But that would probably get me fired that day because I'd be like, well, I have other things and other substances to attend to. But we went to Hot Wheels Monster Trucks Live in Denver at Ball Arena, which was kind of interesting being there, 5 months after we were there for Monster Jam. And my daughters had never been to a non-dirt show. I don't believe when they were really little, they would have seen Dan and Larry drive at some toughest shows, but nothing that's really stuck in their memory. So it's kind of like seeing a Bigfoot truck again for the first time. Shout out to Caleb driving number 15 out there. It was really weird seeing a truck that I, drove a few times out there rumbling around on the floor, because every time I saw Dan drive after I left Bigfoot, he was in newer equipment, like whatever it was, 18 or 21 or whatever, all the nice new stuff they had built. And I never was really in any of those trucks or anything, which, by the way, if you did a comparison of my ass to Dan Runte's seat, you would also know why I was never destined to fill in for Dan Runte. Besides the sheer lack of talent, it was sheer bulk and girth units that I possess. I could not fit in Dan's seat. But anyways, Hot Wheels, we were going to kind of talk about this with Frank some, but obviously he's still on the road. So that kind of is a good segue in. I have mixed feelings about it, right? So positive sides, very kid-friendly. It was an expeditious show. My sinuses were happy. There wasn't a bunch of dirt and dust and stuff blowing around. I think all the drivers did what they were called upon to do. I mean, I know for a fact personally some of those guys out there can run a lot harder than what they were doing, of course, but that's not really what the show style and format calls for, as I'm judging the Sunday afternoon crowd, they were into it. The parents were into it. The little kids were into it. So to me, it's a good thing in that sense. And people were digging seeing cars crush. Like, don't tell anybody in Tampa right now, other than Justin, because you're there. But don't tell anybody in Tampa that, you know, crush cars in an arena are still a kick-ass thing. People were digging seeing stuff get smashed. And I'm sure there was a lot of people that had been to Monster Jam in that building and saw nothing get smashed. So monster truck smashing cars is still really cool. If we all look back to where we were in, like, say, 2010, at the levels of sheer insanity that Monster Jam's freestyles had taken the sport to, we would never have guessed there would be a time where popping and dropping on a set of cars would get people more fired up, arguably, than monster trucks doing moonwalks, right? I think the backflip.
Didn't we talk about it?
What's that?
Didn't we talk my thoughts on the carless shows?
I don't know if we did talk about that or not, but I'm here for the opinion, so let's get that take.
Oh, right. Oh no, like I said, it's completely echoing what you said. That's why I was nodding along so heavily. Is that, like, I think if that was done in smaller settings like that, like in arena shows, or hell, even at, like, if you had a self-built truck at a local dirt track, and in between features, you crushed a friggin' car in the infield, I think people would dig it.
And we've got a whole generation or two of young fans right now that did not grow up with monster truck smashing stuff. You know, it's new to them. And that's what I was seeing at that show. So my daughters loved it. They thought it was fun. They thought it was engaging. My oldest daughter was like, yeah, they don't really jump very high or hard, but she's like, it's really cool. You can hear the cars smashing and, you know, that kind of stuff. So, and of course the sound is totally different because you've got exhaust reverberating off the concrete floor back up at you. So with that and the lights down and everything, I mean, it's a fun sensory experience, I guess. You know, where now Monster Jam starts to feel more like we're taking this too seriously for the sake of competition type event in that same building. So the irony of all this is not lost on me. As a driver, I mean, I didn't like non-dirt shows when I did them, to be honest with you. I mean, I like the consistency and the relative safety, I would say, of dirt in terms of, like, you know, breakage and things like that, or wild runs. But, you know, we went with, obviously it was my family of four, and then my best friend Eric went with me. And Eric's a huge remote control car nut, has loads of monster trucks, and he's really getting into actually, like, enjoying monster trucks, you know, the way we do now. And I was like, you got to come to this show with us. I mean, it helps that we had a suite from Coors, so, you know, that doesn't suck. I mean, all you can drink Coors Banquet and some high quality pot roast mashed potatoes and green beans was pretty badass. I'm not going to lie. So my opinion of the show could be biased. Had I been choking down cold $12 hot dogs and a Diet Mountain Dew, I might not have been as stoked. But anyways, I'm explaining to him, this is not how non-dirt shows used to be. This has gone now to the safest show in the industry in terms of, like, potential breakage and things like that. It's a very well-ran, well-oiled, almost predictable, you know, event. And none of this is dogging. This is all just presenting the facts as I see them. But we look at, like, Thunder Nationals footage from the 90s and Monster National footage from the 2000s. Think about all the times in the trenches with the Hall brothers when we're thrashing to put trucks back together because we're wiping out third members and spindles and four-link bars and shit, you know, racing as hard as, I mean, you've not quite lived until you've watched two highly competitive monster trucks and drivers go wide open throttle from 12 foot back of a set of junk cars, and both of them are rolling the biggest pair of dice they have because they really don't for sure know how their truck's going to fly when it hits that ramp.
That's right.
That is some wild stuff. Have either of you guys, I mean, Looker, I think it's probably a given. You've been to some non-dirt shows or probably worked some non-dirt shows. What's your take on Hot Wheels versus what non-dirts used to be to our sport?
So I think, and I've said this to a lot of people before, Hot Wheels, if you go in knowing that Hot Wheels is a kid-friendly show, that's their demographic. They're not pulling the college kids from the frat house and say, hey, come watch a monster truck rally. No, they're pulling in the kids that have that toy, those 6 or 8 trucks that are at the show. They have that toy at home, and they crush the little toy cars at home, that's who's going to watch it, and that's what you're going to see. As long as you know that going in, you're going to have no letdowns at that show. It's not a fully competitive, Rambo is going to run up against Mike Vaughters and Black Stallion, and we're going to see who's really the king of the non-dirt shows. It's a great product. It's consistent. It's trucks that kids already know that they can buy in the store. They sell lots of merch because they're selling the trucks that you can buy in the store. They crush cars, which I think there's something to be said for that. And they do crush them. All those cars are destroyed, and they pretty much put new ones out for every show. Versus an old Thunder Nationals, which I actually did do a fair number of them in my years for Monster Jam. And then over the years with Elliot, we used to do an arena in Canada. You set the cars up in a very specific way to get racing and wheelies and freestyle to all be a little bit different and lay out the way that you want them to be. Because, not to get too technical, and I'm not a doctor or anything, but like, you want to have similar cars.
Wait a minute, I thought you were.
You want to put
Nurse,
similar
get in here.
size.
This man's not a doctor.
It's a hospital. What is it? Well, it's a big building with nurses and doctors. We don't have time for that right now. Sorry to drop a little airplane humor on you.
We got to get this man to the hospital right now. We can't for 2 hours.
What do you mean you can't tell me your opinion?
Yeah.
Okay, we're done.
Yeah.
We don't need to quote the whole movie. So I remember
That's going to
staging.
be in a future episode.
Yes,
right.
We'll do a rough cuts of airplane.
There we go.
I remember staging trucks at a non-dirt show, competitive side-by-side racing, and them guys would be lining up on the cars 5-6 times to try to find out, okay, if my tires are sitting 6 inches to the left, it's going to give me a better launch than if I'm over on the right side of the cars. That's not how Hot Wheels is. That's how it used to be. They would crush the cars down the wheelies. The older shows, they'd freestyle before racing, which from a track perspective is how you should do a non-dirt show. But we've done stuff later on where you take the first car out and make a van stack in the middle, and you still have fresh cars for them to hit, things like that. But yeah, like you were saying, the Hall brothers and Bigfoot and like Samson back in the day and the Monster Nationals with that big Hemi. Just trying to get
Doug
the little... Yeah, Doug Nelke too.
Nelke. Doug Nelke and Mark Hall might have been one of the most bitter indoor rivalries of the time, dude.
That's right. And just watching them, like two drivers that are just out for blood with good working, powerful trucks on these crush cars that are now about 2 foot tall, lining up, like you said, 10 foot back. We used to measure it 10 foot back from the wheels of the cars. And just, yeah, it was a racing event as much as anything. Hot Wheels isn't like that. And that's okay, in my opinion.
No, I agree. I mean, we're accomplishing different things here, and arguably what Thunder Nationals and Monster Nationals were doing is counterproductive to what any of us are trying to do right now, and what Hot Wheels seems to be doing pretty successfully, and that's producing an economical product that keeps some teams and businesses in business and working. I guarantee you the Bigfoot team does not spend as much for Caleb to run 3 or 4 shows over the course of a Hot Wheels weekend as what they were spending when Harkey was, lawn darting the ass of Bigfoot 14 into the concrete, the cars, the dashers, and God knows what else. Oh, sorry about that. George didn't see the wall there. You know what I mean? Like,
that's right.
The Hall brothers. I mean, running 2 trucks with 2,000 horsepower Hemis in Lenco transmissions and slipper clutches in that environment. I mean, you want to talk about some kind of overkill, dude. I mean, that's like taking a freaking M60 belt-fed machine gun to a pinata at a quinceanera. Like, I'm going to get it this time, and I'm not using the bat. It's like damn,
right.
you don't need that much. So I wish we could somehow go back in time and film some of those non-dirt shows with modern cameras and techniques and thoughts and angles and stuff like that. because I'm telling you, I have stood between nitro funny cars at NHRA events back in the day, thanks to Dodge and to Summit Racing at the time, was able to stand at these national events and feel two 9,000 horsepower or whatever they were funny cars launch. And that is something to be sure. It's probably the most unnerving thing I've ever done around motorsports. But I will tell you, a pretty close second or third to that, strangely enough, is being around the starting line of a non-dirt monster truck race when two highly competitive, high-powered trucks are on kill and going after each other. And you're looking at this mangled, whatever it is, 1985, Ford Crown Victoria or a 2000 Dodge Intrepid or, God forbid, something smaller or newer. And these guys are creeping up to their little duct tape line staging, and then everybody gets up on the fucking converter. And you're like, oh, baby, what is you doing? Baby, don't do that. Like, and then there's trucks, soaring through the air crazily. And I remember there was definitely times where standing in the pits watching Mark run and just watching the truck flying through the air. And like my body's not responding to my brain's commands yet because we're talking milliseconds, but my brain is already processing. Well, we're going to need one of these. We're going to need one of these. We're going to need one of these. Like steering cylinders are in the belly box. Spare 4-link bars are in the rack above, the tire lid. Like you're thinking, holy shit, why are we doing this for 3,000 people at the CSU Convocation Center in Cleveland? Like, so anyways, long tangent, but credit to Hot Wheels for, putting on what I thought was a really fun casual afternoon monster truck show. I mean, we were in and out in 90 minutes or whatever. I mean, if I'd have paid $25 a head for adults and then whatever the kids' price was to sit in the seats, I'd have probably felt pretty good with that, given the state of the world and, the economy. And of course, prices are dropping like flies right now. So that helps, right? But I believe if I'd have spent for like a premium experience being a seasoned monster truck parent, maybe wouldn't have been as stoked about it, I guess. But I mean, for the casual person that's just trying to take their little guy out for a show on his birthday or something like that, I thought it was a damn good time. So, I thought it was all right. So anyways, we did the Hot Wheels thing. So, shout out to Caleb and everybody else that was down there running at that show. And really, other than that, it was just kind of a work type summer here. But I know Matt just fell off his chair or something, it looks like. I don't know. He won't have his camera on while he's in the restroom, ladies and gentlemen. Don't worry.
Sorry about that.
He's coming back. All right, there he is.
There we go.
But, and Justin, in nice case, and I guess you too as well, Looker, and forgive me because I can't quite remember what grade your daughter would have been going into this year, but I had kids starting in second and now seventh grade. I have a junior high schooler now, which is terrifying. And Justin, I saw Ezra started fifth grade. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. At your alma mater, if you will.
Yeah.
And Looker, what about your kiddo? What grade was she firing off into this year?
She's starting as a junior in high school. So you want to talk about terrifying? Just wait, buddy. And she's also at my alma mater too, which is kind of fun. But yeah,
That's cool.
We're gonna skip right over the 11th grader. That now, just for any of you out there that are not parents, the milestones you get when your kids turn a certain age is a reminder that you are no longer a young buck.
Yeah.
I saw the head nods. Yep.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, all right. So I gotta give you a quick one related to that. So my daughters and I, the grocery store we shop at has a Starbucks in it, and every time we go in there, Dad, can we get a Starbucks? And all right, fine, whatever. We'll get you a little Starbucks treat once in a while. Well, there's a couple different girls there that work there, and they love conversating with my daughters, and they're very kind to my daughters and everything. Well, one day I'm in line at the Starbucks. I don't have my daughters with me. And one of these female employees is behind me in line to get some Starbucks on her break. And the other one behind the counter is like, where's your daughters at? It's always so cool when you bring them. And I was like, oh, they're both at home. They're old enough to kind of stay at home by themselves while I run to the store. They didn't want to come to the store. And the girl behind me was like, oh, that's so sad. I love seeing your daughters. I was like, well, you guys are both very sweet to them. I really appreciate it. I said, let me buy you a coffee. I said, you're always so nice. I said, whatever you're having, just throw it on my tablet. But she's like, oh, sir, you don't have to do that. I get a discount. I'm like,
Sir.
the way she said it was like, don't worry, sir. They change your diaper for you in the old folks' home. You'll be okay. Like, son of a bitch. Like, I was trying to do something nice. Just be like, thanks, dude. Like, or I always tell my oldest, don't bro me. Don't be like, bro. At this point, she could have broed me, and I'd have been okay with that. Instead, she sirred me. I was like, this sucks. So
The worst.
yeah,
The
to your
worst.
point, Looker, you're spot on. Spot on. All right. Well, I think that's a good first half to our show right here. We're going to dig into a little bit of non-motorsports topics, but you know what? We're going to keep it all monster trucks tonight. Looker's private helicopter's coming to pick him up in about an hour and a half to whisk him off to his high pressure televised ER job, I believe.
Yes,
at the
very
Rhinoceros
televised.
Conservatory or whatever it is. Welcome to Jurassic Park, except it's rhinos. No, I don't know where the rhino thing
no
came from.
expense.
Sorry. So, yeah, spare no expense. Hopefully not on the helicopter. The way John Hammond cut corners on everything else, I'm surprised the goddamn helicopter made it in and out of that place. But, yeah, so we're going to take a quick break. Where we're going to take a break, normally I'd pump in one of my cheesy commercial splits and ask you to follow us on Instagram and subscribe to us on YouTube and like our MySpace page so we can be in your top 10 friends and, I don't know, watch Justin dancing on the OSMT TikTok. I don't even know if that's what it's called, a TikTok. So I'm throwing all that out. And what you're going to see next, if you haven't already seen it, it's available as a standalone video on the OSMT YouTube channel. But we produced this weekend, a really heavy-hearted and sincere video tribute to Dan Runte and the life he led behind the wheel. And there's so much more we're going to talk about Dan in the second half of the show. And this video actually can't do a lot of justice to Dan's career except for just his driving. But we're going to put that video right now in between segments of the show. And we hope you'll take the opportunity to maybe enjoy that, one more time or for the first time. And then after that, a little break, we'll come back in the second half for our Roundtire discussion. And we're going to do our best to bench race a little bit, tell a few war stories and a few fan stories, and honor the life of our departed friend, hero, and colleague, Dan Runte of Bigfoot. We'll be back after this.
He's been learning here tonight. Dan Runte of Bigfoot. He started out knocking over the turn pole, came back as the fastest loser, and finds himself in the championship against the world champion Torrance. There they go. Dead even going into turn number one. Bigfoot whips it around. Torrance battles, loses a few feet to him. On the turn, the final turn. Bigfoot with the lead. Bigfoot wins it. Bigfoot wins it. He came back from behind. He knocked down the turn pole early on, but Bigfoot, a little luck and a lot of skill, Dan Runte takes the Bigfoot monster truck to a championship in Providence, Rhode Island. He has certainly learned to maneuver these turns. Look at this young man go. Whips it right around. The rear end does not come around this time. A near picture-perfect ride for Bigfoot in Providence. On the finish line, the camera shows you what it's all about. Bigfoot over as cars just barely approaches the cars. Your winner in Providence, Rhode Island, Bigfoot, and Dan Runte getting a big hug from his crew. He is one happy camper. Bigfoot, your winner, and Providence in the Civic Center, and the first win for a young man from St. Louis, Missouri, Dan Runte, and Bigfoot, his first professional win.
What's running through your mind right now?
I'm happy. I'm really happy. I couldn't be any more happier.
Talk about the final run.
Basically the same as one before, as far as Kenny and those guys, they kept telling me, keep making the same runs you've been making. Make the corners tight because you're going to slide in the corners because it is slippery. Whether you feel it or not in the truck, you are sliding. I'm happy the Ford Bigfoot did good.
Going to be a lot of wins for you down the line, Dan, but this one I guess you'll always remember as number one.
You're exactly right, I will. I'm speechless. I don't know what to say.
right, fellas, we're back in it. Part 2 of Bottom Dead Center, Season 2, Episode 1. I'm having to get used to saying Season 2 now. It's like when you're writing the year on everything and it's just changed over. And I'm sure I'll be writing 2025 about 30 days into 2026. So forgive me if you keep hearing me say Season 1, but I can assure you we're in Season 2. But we're going to spend some time here in the second half of the show for the Roundtire Discussion, just lightening the mood a little bit while dealing with a heavy topic, and that, of course, being the loss of Dan Runte over this past couple days. But before we get into that, and of course, in doing that, we're cherishing and honoring, a part of Monster Truck history. But Matt, while we were telling dumb jokes and making fun of Elliot for booking 15 trucks instead of 16 trucks at Fowlerville and stuff like that, we did overlook what I think was probably one of the coolest events of the summer, and I know you were there and can tell us more about it. But tell all of us out there a little bit about that throwback show that you guys did. Was it 91, 92 that you were throwing back to at one of the Monster Truck Throwdown events?
We were throwing it back to 1992. Holland, Michigan, the Ottawa County Fairgrounds. We've done that show for a while, and the crush car provider is always sweet. We usually get a good number of cars, but he told Elliot month leading up to it, he's like, I got you 30 crush cars for this show. And Elliot told all of us, and because we're all fans, everyone that works for him is a fan, just like everyone here is a fan, we said, okay, we're not going to waste this opportunity. So we decided to do a 1992 throwback event. Everything from the crush cars not being painted to the racing track being a 2-car roller with the roofs flattened, which they did at some places, and then followed by 8 cars all on the flat ground. We also did a jump-off competition, a long jump competition with 10 cars and vans where they had about 20 foot leading up to a steep ramp to try to clear as many cars as they could. And I'll tell you, it was just a good time. And not only that, but everyone during the show, we all wore 1992 approved get up. So like I had a Motley Crue album shirt that I had made into a cutoff. I bought some fresh jeans and turned them into jorts, courtesy of Walmart. Elliot stipulated that all the right. Elliot stipulated that
jorts ready to rock.
Oh, I do. I was just sidestepping that. Okay. I got fresh ones. Elliot stipulated that none of the drivers could have working rear steer, and if you did, you had to have the self-center cut off. Neck rolls instead of Hans devices. Oh yeah, there was a lot more involved than that.
All right, so the no Hans device is a little sketch.
Actually, I think we actually did end up running Hans devices. But yeah, no self-center on the rear steer. With the music playlist, which I was in charge of, had nothing beyond 1999. We agreed 90s was the cutoff. So nothing beyond 1999. There was a lot of Way Down Yonder on the Chattahoochee and a lot of Metallica.
Don't take. Oh wait, that's too sad.
Yeah, the 10-car jump-off contest was really cool, and the crowd was into it. Like we did, and this was before the final, so we had the 4 trucks that didn't make it to the final competed in the long jump competition. We brought each one at a time. We went off the flag, not the lights. And it was just cool seeing a truck up in the RPMs and then landing on cars and vans. The crowd was into it. Everybody that worked the event, from us on the Throwdown crew to the crew for the trucks and the drivers, were just pumping our fists in the air, seeing cars getting crushed. It was very cool. A couple reversers, the Saturday night special, as we call it. It was just a really cool show, and I felt like we had to go back and mention that because that was one of the funner events we did this year.
Well, through the glory of our show not being live, as folks were listening to you regale us with tales from Bush era monster truck shows, first Bush, not second Bush, and I'm talking presidents, not Bush Hog. But we're watching footage of that show unfolding right now. That looks like an awesome time, man. I remember, I don't know if it was in a group thread or if it was on a previous BDC episode, but I remember suggesting how cool it would be if Monster Jam had like a theme to some of their arena tours, where one arena tour kicked it back to the 90s, one arena tour kicked it back to Freestyle Mania, and just to change things up, make things a little more interesting. But what you guys did there looks really, really awesome. I love, dude, you're appealing to the few skill sets I had as a driver. I'm like, wait, so limited bonsai straight line racing with some on and off throttle time, no return to center, like all that is right up my alley. That's like all the ride truck drivers in the field that had graduated to race trucks probably did pretty good.
That's right. The other thing we did that was we tried to do as many throwback things as we could, and we had driver introductions. All 6 trucks came out nose to tail. All the drivers got out and stood in a line, and when we introduced the driver, they stepped forward and waved to the crowd, just very like the old TNT days in the early 90s. It was a very cool, I mean, I'm sure a fair number of fans that were at that fairgrounds and showed up were just like, oh, this is a cool monster truck show. But I know a lot of people that showed up, because that fairgrounds has had monster trucks for a long time. I know some people that showed up, saw that, and said that was a cool throwback deal.
That's amazing. And, we talked about the idea of throwbacks early in BDC Season 1. I think you, me, and Frank talked about it, Looker, about like a monster truck version of a Darlington throwback race in NASCAR. So I think Elliot's, certainly onto something right there. Elliot, in case you're watching or listening, I'm still waiting on my complimentary copy of the 2025 Throwdown Souvenir Tour book that has the cool OSMT ad you let me put in there. So pretty pleased. I owe you. But send me one. I want to see that in the flesh. So, very good. So we're going to roll on from that into our Roundtire discussion this evening. Of course, that being the life, career accomplishments, and just how meaningful and impactful Dan Runte's presence was in all of our lives. So there's more information out there than any of us really want to know. I mean, the sad fact is, Dan suffered a motorcycle accident on Friday. It sounds and reads to me like a vehicle didn't see him perhaps and pulled out in front of him. And despite having safety equipment, I mean, there's only so much you can do in a situation like that. So that being said, we're not going to dwell on the negatives. We can't change what happened, but we're certainly going to pay a ton of respect to Dan and his career and what he meant to all of us. So, first thing I want to point out, if you were sticking with us there and watching the tribute video we created, or if you've watched it standalone already on YouTube or Instagram, you'll notice there's some Tough Cuts grade footage pretty early on in there of Bigfoot 2 pulling a sled and crushing some cars. And that was in Michigan in 1990, Belleville, Michigan to be precise. And if you've ever watched, and that was Dan driving, if you've ever watched the 1990 Bigfoot Bash, Battle of the Bigfoots or whatever they called it, from 1990 at Nashville Motor Speedway, where John Pyatt famously yard sales Bigfoot 4, and you've got Kramer in 8 and Andy Brasson, Kramer in 9, Brasson 8. Yeah, I got you. I messed that up.
No, hold on 1 sec. Ezra, please stop with the Nerf gun. Very distracting.
Fire away.
Thank you.
In any case, that 1990 Bigfoot Bash, there was a truck missing. And Justin, according to the schedule data you and I have been able to compile and access, enhance. It looks like it was Bigfoot 2 that was missing from Nashville, and that's because it was Dan Runte driving Bigfoot 2 in Belleville, Michigan at the Wayne County Fair. And that was one of Dan's earliest shows. As a driver for Bigfoot, I'd have to go back pretty substantially in some of my schedule archives to find out if that was truly the first time he went out on his own. I doubt it was. I'm sure he did a spot of driving here or there, filling in or getting some training time behind the wheel. But what strikes me about that footage straight away, guys, is if we're going to start telling the story of Dan's career, which it does precede that by a couple years, and we'll talk about how that came to be and what it entailed here in a moment. But as far as Dan's driving goes, say that's one of the very first shows he did. out there. It's 1990, okay? Bigfoot 8, Bigfoot 9 are the pinnacle of monster truck technology. Bigfoot 4 is about to become the pinnacle of upcycled monster truck technology. And meanwhile, there's Bigfoot 2, which, with the exception of some planetary axles added for strength and some updated sheet metal, it is still very much just Bigfoot 2, which is to say not a lot of suspension travel, not a lot of give, factory Ford frame, upgraded for strength, nothing to write home about in the motor department. And we'll release that full show in a future Tough Cuts episode so you can kind of compare how Dan did to the rest of the field. But I'm telling you, boys, especially on the second jump of his timed run, he sent that sucker. I mean, he really sent that thing out there. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find video footage of anybody out there sending Bigfoot 2 harder or further than that. And if that's not a hell of a exclamation point for Dan to enter the talk as a Bigfoot driver, I don't know what else would be. All right. Well, kind of cruising along here a little bit. Talk about how Dan got into things at Bigfoot. And, of course, I'm only regurgitating information that I've, gathered or tried to learn and lock away in my memory over time. But, from the Freeport, Illinois area, which is where Dan Dubes was from, and Dan was brought aboard Bigfoot primarily, to drive fast tracks in the early days, to kind of be the caretaker and the driver of fast tracks when Chandler wasn't driving. And Dan had, as I was told the story a long time ago, Dan Runte had been working with Dan Dubes at his, either on his pulling truck or in his repair shop he had, something along those lines. And I'm pretty sure, because of Dan Patrick and Dan Dubes and Dan Runte, I think Dan Patrick probably was called Patrick most of the time at Bigfoot, and I guess Dan Dubes was probably Dan. So that would be hence why, Runte got the nickname that he held for so long of D2. And that's what I was always, brought up to know him as when I got into the sport as a professional, let's say. That's what everybody called him, back in the day. And, Dan the man is a pretty good one too. But, D2, he'll always be D2 to me. But, coming up through the ranks, I don't know about you guys. It was easy for me in the late 90s, early 2000s when I'm at like my peak Dan Runte fandom, right? And it was hard for me to fathom that guy was around even back then. Like, he was a crew guy in 88 or 89, and he was driving Bigfoot 2 in 1990. And then he came out Bigfoot 8 and either was not running a ton of televised shows that we always saw, or he was running a snake bite, sometimes with the mask on. So, to me, Dan didn't necessarily take center stage until he was racing alongside, Andy, I guess 93, 94, whatever, on the Penda Tour. And that's when Dan started to really ascend to kind of the top of the driver hierarchy at Bigfoot. But the truth is, he has so much more pass behind them. Justin, I saw some video come out, in the wake of Dan's passing, showing him driving in Australia with what looked like, was it Bigfoot 7? Was that right?
I want to say that. So I know the first Australia was 89, so that was 2.
Yep.
So I want to say Australia.
Looks like he did some driving in Puerto Rico as well in 1990.
Yes, I do have a picture of him doing that, I think, with 7.
Yep, definitely.
Yep, Tennis Center, Melbourne, Australia, Tennis Center, Bigfoot 7, USA Motorsports.
What time of year was that?
That was in August 91.
Okay. Oh, August of 91. Okay, so our Bigfoot 2 footage predates that by a year even, which is pretty cool. But, so then you graduate from Bigfoot 2, you're Dan Runte, now you step into, Bigfoot 7, and you're trying to hold the line now in 1991 against some pretty substantial competition out there because, as it turns out, the top Bigfoot trucks are probably going to take the billing, to the big TV shows. They're racing in the big domes for SRO Pace or USA, or they're doing jamborees and things like that. But by 1991, there's more, let's call them stage 3 trucks there's more Stage 3 trucks out there than what can fit into a show with Bigfoot 8 or Bigfoot 9, right? So that means those trucks need some bookings elsewhere. So they're going to take bookings at B and C level shows or non-televised shows. And so now Dan is the Bigfoot truck at, probably even some pretty decent sized shows. But some of these tube chassis trucks that maybe don't have a gig on a TV show that weekend, now they're coming down and trying to beat up on him. What a tough, and I empathize with that, because I feel like when I was driving 10 or 14, I was going against brand new CRD trucks and metal shop trucks and just newer equipment that could frankly get, put through the ringer a lot worse than those older Bigfoot chassis could. That's a tough deal when you're expected to hold the line like that. And that could have, Looker, I don't know what you think, and I'd like to know what you think, but I could see that trying to almost discourage a driver if you don't see a clear path towards a newer style truck in the near future. That could be a little hard on your feelings or your nerves or your optimism to be running around in I shouldn't say second tier, but frankly in the Bigfoot team, a second tier leaf spring truck, to have to go run against the very best that a lot of other people could come up with.
Oh, 100%. More so back in that day, I think, than today. If you beat Bigfoot, you beat Bigfoot. You didn't have to qualify it with who you beat. So He's coming into these shows with a bigger target on his back than like the Kramer or Andy Brasswood, because he's got a truck that couldn't do as well as the others. But say Lyle Hancock and Gravedigger, who was a force to be reckoned with back then, or Gary Wiggins when he drove a Carolina Crusher, that was a tough truck to beat. They would come up and say, oh, this new driver with the old Bigfoot truck, I'm going to make my name for myself here this weekend. And Runte's got to uphold the Bigfoot name while being at a little bit of a disadvantage. That would absolutely discourage you from, Runte, it seemed like from that footage, if nothing else, that footage of Bigfoot 2, he was not afraid and would get the most out of a truck that he could. And obviously his later years, you knew that he could get the most out of a truck. So he clearly had that in his back pocket, being able to do that from the beginning. But for sure, if you weren't able to do that, that would make you want to go home with your tail between your legs. Like, sorry, Bob, I did what I could, but these guys were just beating up on me. And you know what I mean? There's excuses up the wazoo, but at the end of the day, if you're not giving Bigfoot the name that it deserves, that's going to really hurt your ego and hurt your chance of continuing on driving.
You better go down in a blaze of glory, but also don't wreck the truck. That's a tough line to toe. And then you look at, and I don't have like the complete lineup in front of me, but I think back to, one of my childhood shows. So Arrowhead Stadium, Kansas City. So in 1990, we got Jim Kramer and Bigfoot 9. In 1992, we got Andy Brass and Bigfoot 10 and Gene and Snakebite number 9. In between, in 1991, we got Dan and Bigfoot 7. So you could argue that's a bit of a technological step backwards from Bigfoot 9 to Bigfoot 7 year over year, correct? Now, that was the same weekend that the Memphis Motorsports Park special events series opener was, with Snakebite debuting on Bigfoot 4's chassis and Andy at number 8. And then Kramer was actually out on the West Coast swing handling Salinas, California. So the iron was what was available, right? So he's out there in Bigfoot 7. But then, as I just pointed out, some shows you would have, a plethora of leftover Stage 3 trucks to potentially chew up a young driver like Dan and Bigfoot 7. And then at that show, you don't have so much of that. You have almost like a whole squad of hard-charging B-team trucks. So, the second-tier Gravedigger trucks there running, and you've got Ozark Mountain Vipers running, and the Breens have a couple trucks there running, and things like that. So still a hard-charging show, but maybe a more fair example of competition for Dan to be running against. And, of course, they didn't really run much other than just like a single-jump straight-line track over cars, from what I recall. So not even really a showcase, because, you're going to count on a guy like Runte in that situation, or honestly at any point in a leaf spring truck. You're already seeing the flashes of talent this guy has. So now you're going to count on him on a longer course where a Bigfoot truck, even a leaf spring Bigfoot truck, has pretty decent handling. and so you're counting on him being a good smooth driver and maybe getting a win or going some rounds at least on a turning course or something that requires a longer approach to the track versus just a bonsai run. I mean, a Gravedigger truck with a blown alcohol motor in it on a straight line course is pretty damn hard to beat, especially if it's only one jump.
That's right. And not to jump around, but I wanted to ask, because you guys would probably know more than I would for sure. Wasn't he the original Ricky Rattler? Because it was Colt Cobra before, and then wasn't Dan Ricky Rattler the first time?
Yeah, Justin, I'll let you take that one. Absolutely.
If I remember correctly, yeah, because I've actually been going through that whole era recently. He was Ricky Rattler first. After, I think, what was it? Because a lot of people were actually Colt Cobra. Sorry to break kayfabe, Gene. But like Eric Meager, I think, was a Colt Cobra. Who else?
There was a loose timeline of like Gene was the original Colt, and then I think when Gene got bumped up into 10, when Andy took over the brand new 11, they put Dan in 8. Well, Dan had been in 8, but they put the Snakebite identity on 8, and Dan became Ricky Rattler because he was of a different height and different sound and everything than Colt was. So they kind of kept the gag going, so to speak. And then I think when Dan came out from behind the snakeskin, so to speak, and was Dan, Eric Meager, moved into the role as a repatriated Colt Cobra.
Was that when Dan started with the Power Wheels body?
I believe so. Yeah, around that timeline where Dan kind of developed his own identity. And one thing that we found, I mean, through looking through schedule archives and accumulated data, I mean, to be clear, we're collating this information from multiple sources because that's what it takes. But we've found photos. So far, no videos, unfortunately, but we have found photo evidence of Dan in a very new Bigfoot 14 running a snakebite for multiple weekends at different events and having to change between snake and Bigfoot bodies on the road between gigs because of what schedules and stuff called for him. I mean, how wild is that? Like, you've got the hottest, newest piece in the Bigfoot fleet, and the 2 snakebite trucks are Bigfoot 4 and Bigfoot 14. I mean, that's a gap in competitiveness at that point in the schedule,
He was talking about
like
that.
I said, go ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
He was talking about that on that. One of my favorite VHSs as a kid was Team Bigfoot, which was the 93 Penda series. And as Ricky Rattler, he's talking about, then they take the mask off and he's Dan Runte. And he's talking about how he's jumping in the brand new Bigfoot Cruiser that's Bigfoot 14 for next year. And that's at the end of 93. And that's when he's talking about that. When Patterson was in 10 and Brass was in Wildfoot at that year.
Right. I think, at the beginning of 94.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, at that time, the Bigfoot team, they were about at the zenith of, the demand on their schedule for, the demand was there and they had the trucks, so to speak.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Just so many trucks on the road doing so many different things, so many different paint jobs and identities. And it's not like all of that went away. Like by the time I was there, I mean, we had a lot of different paint jobs and stuff when I was there, but just crazy to think about how busy they were. And then of course, Bigfoot 14, and God, I wish we had footage of it, debuts at the Louisiana Superdome at the end of January in 1994, for US Hot Rod there. And then you just start thinking about everywhere that, trucks are here and trucks are there. And Dan's just leading the charge through there. And one weekend he's Bigfoot 14, and the next he's Snakebite 14, and then he's Power Wheels. And one of the things I love, I was gifted, many years ago from an ex-SRO employee, some of the footage that you might have seen in the Runte tribute video. And I use that stuff respectfully and not, carelessly, because I know how protective that company had always been of its footage. But, I mean, that is one of 14's earliest shows, really, with Dan. I mean, compared against the length of that chassis' career, certainly one of its earliest shows. But those U.S. Hot Rod events with the long jump competition, that was some crazy shit back then. And those trucks were, I mean, really hitting those jumps and sending it out there. And those hits Dan was making in 14 at the Astrodome are works of art. Especially the slide up to the wall, and Joe Lowe's on the call. Whoa, Bigfoot! Like, oh, man. Vintage Dan Runte, vintage Bigfoot 14, vintage Joe Lowe. I mean, vintage Astrodome. Like, could I please get a vintage beer and a vintage hot dog to go with my vintage arousal right now? This is awesome.
Yeah, vintage everything except for new age big air, like you were talking about. Brutal back in the day.
Yeah, just a beard racing seat and a 5-point harness, basically. I mean, your neck collar's not doing anything for your back or your upper body in general.
We were talking about it before. We touched on Hans devices. You guys would obviously know better than I would. When did those really start coming into play?
So obviously
early 2000s.
Early 2000s was my understanding. Maybe a little bit with the airplane jump, right, Looker? Like they had a test version of that, or an early version of the Hans for that airplane jump, right?
Yeah, so I know. So I worked at a show, just one that I remember very specifically. I don't remember why, but it was in 2006, and Runte was there in 14, and he had a neck collar where he could turn to the side and look at me stage. But I know he used, for the airplane jump, he did use a Hans for that, but I think that was because that was a specialty jump. But I think in everyday competition, it was like, probably, I want to say like 2010 almost, when people started using them. Right? Does that sound right? Maybe before?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I wasn't as aware of what everybody else was doing, but I know, like at Hall Brothers, you're always kind of looking like, well, what's Bigfoot doing? What are we doing? And it's kind of coming back to me now. I think when Dan did the airplane jump, and I think the hauler jump in Vegas, where he sheared the spindle off, they had early or prototype versions of the Hans, and they might have even like broke the Hans on the airplane jump. I feel like I've read or seen that. Now, as far as Hans devices and containment seats in regular competition, I want to say it was 2004, 2005 at Hall Brothers when we got our first Randy LaJoy seat, the Joy of Seating. Shout out Randy LaJoy, not shout out Corey LaJoy. But that was around the same time. Of course, Mark was using a Hans device at that point. I mean, I know those guys were really early adopters of having those. But what's weird is shock technology kind of made a pretty big leap in the early 2000s. And when Ramnator and Rammunition trucks were running the reverse accumulator and quad bypass comb shocks, I literally remember Mark Hall going out in Lima, Ohio and freestyling with no neck collar on. He's like, it's really not that bad. He's like, no, it's good. I don't even need this stupid thing. It doesn't do anything anyways. And Mark's out there. In some of my photos, you can see the silhouette of Mark in the cab. And it's just, it's like a motorcycle rider wearing a helmet. There's nothing around his neck. And he complained about nothing. The truck was working so well. But then I remember watching Dan go out. And Dan was, short, of course, but he was similar to how I like to be in the truck. I like to be like up on the wheel. You know what I mean? I'm not laid back, back here cruising. Like I could not drive like a men's truck, right? Like sitting on the floor with everything stretched way out in front of me. I couldn't do that. So Dan's way up on the wheel, and he just had a neck collar on. And I remember watching his head just whip around quite a lot at some of those jamboree hits.
If you watch the test footage of 8, like I remember how, because you watch all the videos where they're talking about 8 and about how it's safer for the drivers and all this stuff. And in some of the test footage, I can't remember who was driving it, whether it was like Gene or Jim or someone like that, but their head on one of the jumps ends up in their lap. Like, and that's 8. Like, that was the safe truck for that day.
Hell, look at some of the early Penda footage from '94 when they were still trying to dial in 14. And I want to say it was at Lima. Dan's out there, and the truck's just not handling right. And it's, bouncing real hard on the second ramp and kind of taking a nose-high attitude over the cars and then landing, ass first and whipping you down. And holy cow, man, you see that dude's head almost disappear below the door frame. And I don't know. Some of the greatest race car drivers in the world are little dudes, and maybe that's for a reason. I mean, Dan was not a huge guy, and he put up with some beating in his time. I mean, I would argue he never had a truly optimal riding monster truck until he got into Bigfoot 18, which was in the last quarter of his career, let's say. I mean, I can tell you from having driven trucks that were equipped with pretty much the same gear he had, they I mean, they were better, arguably, than what they were 10 years prior to that. They still weren't great. You can only only do so much with 18 inches of workable suspension travel in the front of a monster truck versus everybody else that's got, 10 more than you or whatever. So there's something to be said about, and maybe this is a cool topic to veer off on. Let's talk about Dan's durability, his resilience. This guy through the grinds, and that's something that when we make the Bigfoot History Archive finally public, when we get around to it, I think people are going to be stunned to see how much these guys worked over their careers. As kids, we tend to just think of, well, Bigfoot ran, 8 races on the Jamboree schedule that tour. And, maybe they must have been at, Ford dealers or Firestone dealers the rest of the year. And whatever your misconception of that might be, I guarantee it's wrong. I mean, I wish Matt Stoltz was on the show right now so I could hear him sing out hallelujah like he's in a Southern church. The 90s U.S. hot rod era was not documented for us as fans nearly well enough. And I bet video-wise we've missed out or we're currently missing out if they have a bunch of it. And I'm sure they do. Just a note to you guys over there. There's probably some fucking kick-ass monster truck racing happening that Bigfoot was in the thick of, and we've only seen like a fraction of it through inside Monster Jam shows and stuff. Looker, would you agree with that?
Oh, 150%. I'd love to know just even the racing that took place then. Forget about all the little stuff that you see. I mean, nowadays, if something happens at an event, you've got 5 angles of it on YouTube and Instagram and whatnot. Like, all that stuff would have been cool to see, but even just the events that took place back then that aren't documented, yeah, that's an understatement for sure. I know some of the stuff that I saw as a kid that, like, well, that was pretty cool. Imagine what's going on the same night in 5 other places,
Yep. I think that's, and Justin, you might, be the one to chime in on this even more than me because you're even deeper into the schedule archive than I am. But, you just pick a weekend like I did with, Dan's in Bellevue, Michigan. All the other Bigfoot trucks are in Nashville. I mean, which one of us really gave a shit or thought much about where Bigfoot 2 was at? We just watched the show as it was broadcast with all these different Bigfoot trucks. Whoa, look what happened at Bigfoot 4. Like, that's crazy. Look, Bigfoot 9 and 8 are racing. And no one's thinking there's still a dude out there slogging through a show in Michigan. Or, you think about the other show we mentioned of Dan being at Arrowhead and Bigfoot 7. And you don't tend to think about as a fan sometimes, well, why is he there? Where's everybody else at? And then you realize, holy cow, man, there was like a big show happening every weekend that this team was pulled in different directions to. And I mean, that's some crazy stuff to really take everybody on a journey digging into when the time comes, right?
Yeah. No, like I said, we touched on the same thing. We touched on it the last show we did. September 28th and 29th, 84. 1 and 4 at the Marion County Fairgrounds. And let's see, 3 is at the Silver Dome.
I'm finding where you're at here on my archives.
Is that Marion, Ohio?
No. Indy. Yeah, so they were doing the Indy Jamboree the same weekend that 3 was at the Silver Dome.
Gotcha.
Well, if you really, and I was going to say, in Bigfoot 2's in Reno, Nevada.
Right.
Yep. No, and then just looking at where everybody has to be the next weekend. I mean, Bigfoot 3 leaves Pontiac and then has to go to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, for a run of displays. And this truck's got to go to Pennsylvania, and this truck's got to go to Oakland. And I'm telling you, I burned up some miles while I was on the road, but those guys were animals back then.
Well, like what you guys were talking about earlier in the early 90s, like you said, it just got, I don't want to say worse, but it got worse with the more trucks in the fleet. Like you could look at just Bigfoot 10's 1992 schedule, and you're like, holy shit, that's a lot. Then you compound that with, Safari Foot 2, Safari Foot 3, 1, if 1 was doing anything, 5, and all the rest of the trucks, and it's all just
And
Like
Dan worked through all of that. And I'm sure that wasn't easy for him. I mean, I think it's pretty well documented in like that CBS sort of like pre-reality television reality documentary they filmed.
It's really cool to be up here. We have the prime seats.
This is perfect, yes. And I can see a camera looking right at me.
Bob's the owner of Bigfoot, a multi-million-dollar company that's known as the unbeatable top dog in the sport. He has an entire crew here. He's got like 10 people and 3 trucks, his wife and his motorhome, a complete computer setup. And they're rearing to go. What do you think about the race today?
I think we're going to win.
Dan Runte is 34 years old and is Bigfoot's #1 driver. He grew up on a farm in Illinois and has been with Bigfoot for almost 10 years.
You're welcome.
It seems like Dan's gone as high as he can go in this business. I mean, he drives the hottest truck for the best company. So when I met him in St. Louis, I at least expected him to have a decent roof over his head.
I got that storage shed back there. I don't remember what the number is or how much it is.
Okay, what's the last name?
Runte, R-U-N-T-E. God, I didn't know you were right there.
Tell me about what's in here real quick.
It's just stuff. I mean, everything out of my apartment. My lease was up, and there wasn't no sense in getting another place before winter.
How come?
Because I'm never here. This is the longest I've been here in a month. Why do you ask so many questions?
I can't believe the top driver of the top company lives in a semi-tractor trailer. This is it. This is Dan's home in here. It's a very simple trailer. He keeps most of his things in storage because there's obviously not enough room in here. Does that bug you that you can't have a permanent place to be?
Didn't I answer that question already?
No.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's hard, especially this year.
I see that the guys who are considered the best in the business still...
Dan didn't have a lot of a social life or a home life at that time. I mean, that poor guy was on the road constantly, and he's basically living out of his hauler at Bigfoot when he's not on the road. But Christ, he's on the road well more than he wasn't. And I just don't understand how somebody finds the resilience to just keep pushing and not just get bored with it and say, you know what, I've kind of done everything. Like after the airplane jump, where are you at as Dan Runte, right? Where are you like, okay, what's the next milestone in my career? I mean, at that point, Bigfoot and Monster Jam have already been on the out, so it's not like he has world finals to look forward to. So the fact that he kept his head down and stayed so loyal to the organization, and we'll touch on his non-driving contributions here in a little while, but kind of coming back to the 90s, we opened our tribute video to Dan with his first, let's call it as Brett Kettner would call it, a national event win on the U.S. hot rod circuit. And, so Dan wins a TV race on a Chicago-style course, which, point in case, Bigfoot 8 gets stomped into the mud more often than not in the 92 Camel Tour by the high-horsepower lightweight trucks like Taurus and Barefoot. But you put the kid on a turning course, and, Bigfoot 8 turned really tight in the rear, and still a pretty nimble truck. And Dan's, despite being a young driver, by the time he gets that win, he's paid his dues, guys, for 3 years. He slogs it out in Bigfoot 2 in 1990, slogs it out in Bigfoot 7 in 1991, and now he's slogging it out in Bigfoot 8 in 92, against some trucks that, even though they were, in many cases, also front-engine trucks, they were well overpowered compared to Dan's truck. And so to see him get that win, I hadn't watched that race in a long time, and multiple people brought it to my attention.
Isn't there a race on that show where he hits the cars crab style?
There might have been, because he was called for a turning pole or an infraction.
Yeah. And then, he comes over and he's completely freaking sideways going over the cars.
But it's monster trucks, so you can come back.
Yeah.
And I'm glad he did, though. Sometimes you got to lose your way to a win. But, I mean, that makes... Everything's different now, right? Because we've lost him. But, we're the guy interviewing him says, well, I'm sure this will be the first of many wins for you, Dan Runte, but I bet this one will be real special to you. And I was like, that fucking guy had no idea how right he was, saying this one would be the first of many wins. I'm hard pressed. I mean, I know there's young drivers now that didn't know really who he was or don't know a lot about him or anything, but there's been a lengthy span, multiple generations of drivers that some of which have come and gone, some of which are still driving now, that looked up to Dan tremendously. If Jim Kramer was my idol in the 80s and early 90s, then Dan was certainly my idol, right up until my time when I started working for the Hall brothers. Watching him on TV on whatever Saturday mornings on Trucks and Tractor Power and stuff, and just this guy, like, I'm so glad he drives for us, is kind of how I looked at it. It was like having a star quarterback, and especially after Brass left, God dang, Meager was really good too. But after Brass left, Dan ascended to the throne as the top dog and stayed there for a long time for good reason, wouldn't you guys say?
Yeah, yeah. No, he was, like you said, the bridge from Kramer to Brass to Dan, and then onwards with Larry Swim and everything like that. He was, but even still, like, because he shared tracks with all those guys, and yeah, he was the free Dan the man.
Excuse me.
I think
it's crazy. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Looker, please.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, we've talked about it on previous episodes. The peak of performance racing in monster trucks, I think, peaked at the Penda series, right? Where the trucks were just built to go fast. That was, 95 to 96? Runte was the man at those shows, right?
I think you could even say 90. You could probably say 92 to 96. Yeah, I'd say that window.
Right.
But didn't that start in 91, though?
It did start in 91.
Yep. Yeah, but I think to Matt's point, the insane speeds and the cutthroat racing had not quite caught up to the driver's ambitions at that point. But I think by 93, you were either hip with what was going on or your ass was in the dust.
That's true, yeah, because by then all the Stage 2 trucks had kind of finally gone to the wayside and everything like that.
You didn't have Goliath at a 96 Penda series. Nothing against Alan Torres.
Right.
I mean, I would have paid for it.
Right. But, like, Dan was winning. Like, in my mind, the most iconic Penda truck was Bigfoot Power Wheels. That's just my opinion. It was so fast, it just looked good, in my opinion, that OBS Ford and the paint scheme. And he was winning in those events when it was the peak of what you could say monster truck performance racing was in the mid-90s, which ended up being where that kind of tapered off in the whole industry. And he was the man then, and then he's still winning in the late 2000 teens in Bigfoot 21 in first quarter shows.
I mean, he was beating people in the late teens that were infants when he was beating people in 94.
Yes.
To your point about Power Wheels, the two most Penda signature-looking monster trucks, in my opinion, was Power Wheels Bigfoot and Monster Patrol. There was something about both of those trucks ushering, something about those trucks just ushering in the new, the Monster Truck Madness era, let's say, of monster trucks at the time. I mean, those two are just super iconic to me. And Looker, just keep me on track where your timing is at too. In all seriousness, we joke, but Looker is a trusted, trained, and certified medical professional, and does have a job to do tonight. So we can't take up his whole night on here. I wish we could, but a couple races that I put in his tribute video, all from the same track, that I want to bring up, and I think they're underappreciated victories, is how fucking good Dan was at Rocky Mountain Raceway in Salt Lake on the figure eight course there.
Yes.
You see him racing against Monster Patrol and coming from behind for the win. And then shout out to Paul Marzine, fellow Wyoming resident and OSMT fan, for letting me use his video footage from the 2010 Rocky Mountain Raceway. Or sorry, maybe his was the 2012. In any case, I laid over top of each other, synced up as best as I could, Bounty Hunter and Bigfoot racing in 2010 and in 2012. And they're different trucks, same drivers, different years, and it's frightening how similar both of their runs end up being and how close those runs are. But Dan's consistency in 16 versus 18 to me is badass. And it shows, like, if you have a pretty good truck, right? 16 was a really good truck. 18 was a really, really good truck. So they're top shelf equipment, but they're such different trucks. And for Dan to have driven the same kind of Bigfoot truck, basically from 93 until, when did we bring 18 up? 2010? No, 2011, somewhere in there. I don't know. I mean, for 2 decades, Dan was driving the same kind of Bigfoot truck, essentially. And then to get upgraded, he passed through a time warp and morphed up into Bigfoot 18. And I encourage you to go back and revisit those runs laid over top of each other. Everybody out there watching, I can lay them on top of this while we're talking about it. It's incredible how consistent Dan is on those runs. And he was so good at that track. He could manage the truck while it was behind, because obviously, and Matt knows this from building a ton of figure eights, one, it's hard to build a figure eight track that's truly even. I do think the 2 laps for the finals at Salt Lake was a great way to equalize things a little bit. But Dan never panics when he's behind. And I think that's kind of the key to him pulling those races off against Cretan, where Cretan seems to be driving a little more on the ragged edge. Once he starts to get behind, a little bit of panic sets in. What was your guys' impression? Because I'm rambling here. I'll talk about Dan all night. I'm rambling. But Looker, starting with you, kind of what's your perception of watching those runs on there?
First off, I want to thank you for including those, because it's not around anymore, but RMR used to be one of the really underrated, cool outdoor shows back in the day. And I had wanted to go to it sometime. I never got to it, unfortunate. But yeah, just being able to control yourself when you're behind in a figure eight track, because you're both on the inside one time or 2 times in the case of that last lap or the final race. To be able to control yourself, to know, okay, I'm not actually behind, but I still have to really give her to make sure he's not really in front of me. That takes a real racer to do that. To be on he wasn't really on the ragged edge, but to be like on rails, I guess you could say, and be able to control yourself enough to know, okay, I got to hit my marks with this corner, and I'll catch him the next time, because I'm not actually behind yet on a figure eight track. It really takes a real racer and a real talent behind the wheel to do that. And like you said, in 2 totally different trucks. That's just a really underappreciated thing that happened there that you put in that video.
Justin, I don't know if you noticed, but I mean, the trucks even were wearing different tires. Dan didn't use the same set of tires on 18 that he was using on 16 there. So, I mean, they say all racing is, boils down to what's the tire. The tire dictates everything else. And in Dan's case, even different tires, and I can't imagine how much heavier. I'm sure that we probably built that truck 1,000 pounds heavier than 16 was. I don't know, man. I don't know about you, Justin. It gave me flashes of like Andy Brass at Louisville in 1990 type stuff.
I was gonna say, yeah, so I don't know if I've ever actually seen that footage. I've seen pictures from those shows, and I know I have. I think Paul's pictures in the archive. I don't know if I'd ever actually seen the footage from the racing though, but that's the same kind of vibe it gave me. Was a good Andy Brass and Gary Porter kind of vibe, and even as a viewer, to Matt's point, you're kind of doing the same thing, because you're like, he's behind. I don't like this. I don't like this. Come on, Dan. Come on.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh yeah, he's got another corner. And then when he's in, okay, good. He's inside now. Okay, good. Go. And yeah, no, like I said, that I'd like to see that. I don't know if TMD ever covered that, because I think that would be a fun show all the way over to see.
Yeah, I think they did some work out there. I can't remember if they did the year with Retrofoot or not, but that year that Dan, well, both of those years, but especially when Dan beat Cretan with 16, I mean, we knew that was a big year for us at the team, because it was the 35th anniversary, and 16 was the newest truck that we had at the time, although it really wasn't that different than 15 or 14, honestly, or 11, except the driver. Big ass difference right there, because he was a good driver, to put it very, very mildly. But, Cretan was kind of at the zenith of the high peak of his powers, I feel like, at the time, too. I mean, if anything, maybe he was still ascending somewhat, even on the monster truck, hierarchy of competition. And so when he's got really good equipment out there and a big motor and a good driver and all that stuff, that was a pretty cool rivalry those guys had going, especially centered around that facility. And I remember several of us Bigfoot guys, we were all in our own different places. I wish I could look at what the schedule was and where people were at and everything. I don't know why. I'm thinking I might have been in Canada even when that went down. But I just remember text messages are flying back all night, because no one's streaming the event. No one's live tweeting what's happening. So we're all waiting for text messages from somebody's wife or girlfriend or somebody in the pits or whoever the hell was texting who. But we're all I'm texting Chris Ludwig. I'm texting Bob. Have you heard? How's Dan doing? Is whatever. And then when the text message circle started blowing up that Dan won, Dan beat Cretan in the finals, and it was just like a loud F yeah in the hotel room or the holler or wherever the hell I was, stationed at the time. Let's say. How do you root for a teammate any harder than what you want to root for Dan in situations like that? And we're probably going to need a second episode to cover all of this stuff, but a couple things more I wanted to touch on with Dan was his sense of humor. We can talk about the performance stuff, till we're blue in the face. And as we're talking about it, I'm realizing we don't have enough time in this day to cover the performance side, but let's just talk about his humor and his humanity a little bit, Looker. I sent you guys, so everybody out there knows, I'm not going to publish them because they're candid cell phone videos I took back in 2013, and they're really just, they're not, it's nothing bad. It's just not for public consumption. Is what it is. But, Dan and Larry Swim, Darren Schnell, myself, Danny Moss might have been in there, Tim Mazenis, Mullet. We're hanging out in a hotel room, and we're having some of these, Captains and Cokes and shit like that, and just decompressing from a really stressful, weekend of doing an SST show on the Robbie Gordon tour there. Super shitty time is what I like to refer to SSTs as. But we're in the room, and Dan's giving me some shit or something because my Domino's pizza box with leftovers won't fit right in the fridge in the hotel, and it's keeping the door on the fridge open, and he's trying to, we're all laughing because he's trying to fix it, and he's had some Captains and Cokes, and he's trying to fix it and can't quite get it fixed. Then Larry Swim steps in and just demolishes the pizza box by rolling it up like a poster, shoves it in there, and we talk about Dan's laughter, just kind of that loud bellowing laugh that he had. And when he laughs in that video, he goes, "Well, that shit ain't gonna be crap for eating next time," or some such like that. He throws a cup of ranch at me in the video and shit. That means more to me than any video I have of Dan racing, because that's just him with his guard down, hanging out with a bunch of people that he could have been that driver that was I got my own room, I'm going to keep to myself, do my own thing, and instead, him and Larry could have been we're the two senior drivers, we're fucking really cool guys and really good drivers, and we're going to go hang out. And instead, they let chuckleheads like me and Mullet hang out in there and stuff like that. And so what I was going to ask now, Looker, is, share a story or two with us of some humor you've witnessed maybe with Dan, because I know you've actually been at quite a few shows around him in the past.
Yeah, I saw him a lot as a kid, as a fan. Actually, the first time I ever saw him run was just before he got that win in Providence at that TV tour in '92. And then as working at shows, I actually did a lot with him. Back in my old days, starting out at Checkered Flag, Dan would run the Summit Body 14. And at one show at the Charlotte Coliseum, as you know, and anybody that's worked at a show, you check the crush cars for stuff that you got that might be in there lurking around, right? You might get somebody's photo album, or, not saying we've ever found a pair of ladies' undergarments in the trunk of a car, and not saying that I've ever hung. Yeah,
I was gonna say you found ladies' underwear in a car. I actually found. I'm not going to use the coarser term for multiple cats, but I did find literally myself and some other guys in Lima, Ohio. Once we found kittens in the trunk of a crushed car that had been abandoned by their mom or somebody. We rescued them. Alan Pizzo and Mark Hall rescued them. Story for another time, but Anyways, yeah, the jokes can write themselves as Looker tells us about what he found in his crush car.
So, like I said, we were at the Charlotte Coliseum. It was Runte was there. Hawkins had 2 trucks. Mitch Tolochka had 2 trucks. Remember, we paid a lady of the night to give Mitch a big hug and say, "I'm your biggest fan." But also, what happened at that show was we found some ladies' undergarments, and they were bright pink in color, and might have hung them from the middle roll bar in the front, so it looked like they were the hanging dice from an old cruiser car rearview mirror type thing. And Dan didn't see that until he went up for intros, and he seemed to appreciate it quite a bit. Just little stuff like that I'm sure I've forgotten more than I remember. Just the little things like that, the humor being later on on the toughest shows on the road with him and Larry. Just good times all around. Great sense of humor, like you said.
I remember there was a strange kind of camaraderie, but also competitiveness that the Jamborees fostered in the early 2000s. And of course, we're on kill trying to beat Bigfoot at the Jamborees. And honestly, like Bigfoot's performance at the time wasn't always on par with what we were bringing at Hall Brothers, I think is fair to say. I think the results kind of speak for that. But I remember one time we did a Jambo or something somewhere, and then like the next week, special events had us go up to Unadilla, New York, where I don't know if there still is, but there used to be a short course off-road race course there in Unadilla. And they had Raminator and Bigfoot booked on there, and I think we ran Ramunition as well to make exhibition runs on the short course, which it's carved into the side of a hill, as I remember it. I think I have some video from it buried somewhere, but anyhow.
I have pictures from it because I was there.
Oh, were you there? Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Well, there was some catastrophic rains, I recall, that weekend. And I remember in the pits where we had the monster truck haulers parked, a track official at one point, there was so much standing water, and all 3 pairs of boots I had brought were soaked through. Everyone had socks and boots trying to dry out in the haulers. It was cold, it was wet. And I remember I was standing there in wet boots talking to Dan, and he's, you know how he would huddle when he was having a cigarette, he's like, "Huh, this sucks, dude." That's my best Dan Runte impression. And I was like, yeah, I know. And I'll talk about that part in a minute. But anyways, so I remember an official from the track comes over, and he's got a metal spike and a sludge, and they're driving it in the ground, and they're putting 20-inch holes in the ground and pulling them out every 10 feet. And sure enough, it started draining the water. So I don't know if there was a clay on top of, the soil underneath, and it was holding up drainage. But I remember Dan just be like, "What the fuck?" And he was so impressed that that shit worked, And there was just a bunch of other obscenities, about I never would have thought that would have worked. But it was just that it was all humanity. We were all mingling with each other and just trying to get through the weekend and, help each other. I mean, helping Dan, spotting him through a gate or backing into a park, whatever it took, I think Tim and Mark very openly expected us to make sure we were good, industry teammates in situations like that, where it wasn't Bigfoot versus Raminator. It was Raminator and Bigfoot trying to put a good image forward for the sport. And of course, Dan was an excellent person to do that alongside us, I think. I'm going to get off in the weeds here a little bit, but the hauler Dan had back then reminded me of this. But, he had I called it the Milky Way hauler with the cool murals and stuff on the side. There was actually 2 Bigfoot trailers painted like that at one time with matching tractors. But the trailer Dan had was originally a single axle that Lurch used with Bigfoot 12, and then they put another axle under it, and he made a race trailer out of it. But anyways, I remember seeing Dan so many times in my high school career using that trailer, and so many times in my early days at Hall Brothers, working out of that trailer. And then eventually I worked out of that trailer some, both with him or, taking it out on trips by myself and stuff. And it's wild to think about. But as we talk about Dan's humor, I also want to just talk about his humanity and his ambassadorship for the sport. And I'm going to share a couple pictures in here of, myself with Dan when I was in high school. And he had absolutely zero impetus or requirement or responsibility whatsoever to show me anything more than the time of day and sign an autograph for me. And instead, I mean, he showed me how to change tires on a truck and letter the white on the tires and properly dust the body so you don't scratch the paint job, and little things that even some of us old guys that are kind of cynical now, like when we see an internet kid and he's like, I'm a crew guy for this team. And it's like, well, all you did was shine the tires and brush the body off. And it can be kind of just easy to be dismissive like that. But the truth is that is a starting point, and you have to start somewhere. And that is one of the points Dan let me start at. And I'm forever thankful to him for those memories. And, Matt, I'm sure you've probably seen that at the shows too, where Dan's never been too good to, take the time to show somebody something. He's never was dismissive, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
Oh, 100%. From, like I said, he used to do a lot of the checkered flag shows that I started out at. If I had a question, I would ask him. He was someone that I knew was knowledgeable because I knew his resume and monster trucks, and he would never shy away from explaining something. And even at the toughest shows where he was definitely the old guy that would absolutely beat anybody any night, and not just do it, he would be expected to do it. So from that perspective, he did not mind helping anybody out with anything, whether it was, helping move trucks around so we can get the edge of the floor pushed back in for, from an afternoon show to an evening show, things like that with the dirt. Just one of the guys that you'd love having around, because not only is he going to put on a good show and help elevate the show to the next level, he's really going to be a team player, and just whatever you need, he'd be there to help with.
I'm glad you used the phrase team player. I want to expound on that real quick. In my time at Bigfoot, there was a lot of younger or newer guys there like myself, and we had Dan as a role model to look up to, and in a lot of ways I think we did, or we tried to, but I don't think we did nearly enough good a job as what we could have. Because as an older guy now, and helping manage people in my current job and things like that, obviously with the wisdom now of 40 years instead of 25 years, I can look back and see what an asset an employee like Dan was to that team, not just on track. But, I was fucking crying yesterday making that video. I was crying finishing it today. I'm not afraid to admit that to everybody out there. And if anybody has anything to say to it, go ahead, at me. I dare you. But I was thinking of a memory I had of Dan where I had rolled my tires out of my hauler on the side of the building, and they were covered in mud. And I, secured them, and then I pulled my hauler around the back of the building, unloaded the monster truck, pulled it around back, and then parked my hauler. And so then what you would do is you'd wash your monster truck first, try and get it cleaned up, blow it off with the air gun or whatever, and then get it inside the shop so the shop could start servicing it, to help get it turned around for the next week. And then you'd go out and wash your tires, and that was one of the less glamorous jobs any driver at Bigfoot had to do. And I remember I washed my truck, and I took it inside, and I was trying to talk to Brian or somebody about, maintenance stuff that needed done. And Dan was finishing washing his tires when I was doing all that. I come out, and Dan's got my tires halfway washed. Like, again, pardon my language, Dan fucking Runte is too good to be washing my tires. He does not need to be washing my tires. That man has more important and better things to do with his time. And that's not how Dan saw it at all. He's not Dan Runte. He is a coworker. He is an employee at Bigfoot, and you're his teammate. He had a power washer in his hand, and there was 4 dirty, unattended tires. And that man just started washing them. And I came out, I was like, I'll take over for you on that, dude. Sorry. He's like, oh, no big deal, man. This shit's got to get clean, And then he just moved on to his own thing. That's just the little things that you see in a person like him. And obviously I've not been around that team for a real long time, but especially as Kramer departed years ago, Dan kind of stepped into that role of sort of running the team, as I understand it, from the fleet side of things, let's put it. And, man, I mean, obviously their stuff still looks great and has been running great, and he's done the very best he can, with everything at his disposal. And I'm not saying they won't find somebody to carry on that, but I mean, with Kramer long since retired and now Dan gone, I mean, that's kind of the last of the real old guard there that knew the Bigfoot way, if that makes sense at all.
Yeah, it does make sense. Knowing where they came from is a big thing. I think a lot of companies in general, they lose their way when they don't remember where they came from. You don't need to do things the same way for 40 years, but you need to remember where you came from. Whether it's just being someone that used to be a fan at a show and being able to step back one time during the weekend and say, all right, would this have been cool to me as a kid? You know what I mean? You need to remember where you came from. And yeah, like you said, Dan being there from the 80s up until the 2020s, you know, that's invaluable experience and from the inside, you know. How do you put a price on that?
Well, that's just it. It's truly priceless. I mean, even just his contributions to, you know, somebody like Justin that's been a fan for his whole life. And I'm not trying to speak for you, Justin. I'll throw the floor to you here in a sec. But I mean, you know, from your standpoint, as a fan, you know, the gifts that he gave me as a young kid or an aspiring professional or as a professional, the gifts or lessons that he gave Looker as a contemporary, let's say, or a coworker in a show environment. And then, you know, for people that, and there's, you know, exclusively fans, but now also kind of like researchers like yourself. I mean, tell me about the kind of gifts that you feel maybe you've received from his time.
Well, like I said, Dan was always one to put on a good show and do what it takes to get to the next round. And yeah, man, I wish I had the words, man. It's just been hard this weekend. But he always seemed to give his all. Like I said, no matter what adversity he faced. Yeah. Like I said, I've got so many moments of him driving along with the crew and everything like that. And I got cool shots of him that I found, you know, waving to the fans after a freestyle or something like that. And like you say, it's those little moments.
You know, I think about Dan's training and mentoring and tutelage of aspiring and young drivers is also something that I think's probably been overlooked by a lot of folks, and myself included, because, I mean, I have two Dan Runtes that I think about the most in my life, and it's the one that made the most impression on me in my younger days, and then the one that's made the most impression on me, you know, in my professional life. And really the one that I forget about, because I didn't get to spend as much time with Dan at Bigfoot as what you might think. Or if I did, it was very much and I say this not in terms of equaling my talent to his, I mean in terms of like, we're both on the payroll, we're contemporaries, we're coworkers. Just sitting around literally, you know, hey, KD, how's your old lady doing? When's she moving down? You know, like stuff like that. And just having a morning break and, you know, eating some breakfast or something at the shop, you know, because you started early, like little conversations like that. God, I wish I had all of those memories somehow on a video, but I guess I'm glad I don't too, because the most authentic part of, I feel like, my relationship with Dan, and I bet a lot of others agree with me on that, is not having some version of this out trying to, hey Dan, so tell me about that time that you beat Paul Schaefer at Rocky Mountain. You know, there's a time and place for that kind of storytelling, but I've always felt that no matter how much I screw up, as long as I just be chill and act like I belong in the moment and just don't make too big an ass of myself, I'll get along okay. And that's kind of how I tried to approach it when I was around somebody like Dan or Jim Cramer or somebody. Is just, you're there for a reason, act like it. And that's when those people tend to be their best selves. They can feel comfortable around you and let their sense of humor out and give you a hard time if you need a hard time, or give you a word of an encouragement if you need a word of encouragement, or, you know, a word of like, hey, get your shit together, you're fucking up, or something like that. So Dan's ability to reach down to people, he's reaching down from this high peak of experience and intelligence and superiority, but at the same time he's making you feel like he's grabbing your hand and bringing you closer to his level, rather than he's stepping down to your level. Like, Dan was never condescending or anything like that. At those SST shows, you talk about trying to mentor young drivers. I mean, I can't say that, Mullet Tim Mazenis had been driving for other teams when he came to Bigfoot. And, he drove some pretty kick-ass equipment before and after I think that he was at Bigfoot too. I think his experience in Bigfoot 10 was probably less than what he was expecting. And it's part of probably why it didn't work out so well for him, I guess. And I don't know how much he really was willing to listen to what Dan had to say, but for me, being a history nerd and a fan above all else, when Dan had advice to give me about how to run 14, I tried to listen to it. I know I wasn't talented enough to make use of all of his advice, but I definitely remember words of encouragement from him when I'd be nervous at some of those SST events, but also like in LA where, we did our sighting lap, our recon lap, the night before, and I, went too hot across the double and almost wanted to roll the truck backwards on the uphill whoop-de-woos, and I caught it, and I made it look good and brought her down and brought her on back to the pits, and Dan comes over and he's laughing, and I mean, I can't do my Dan Runte impression very well, so I'm not going to keep trying to do it, but he comes over.
Freestyle in there too? You doing fucking, why not? Huh? That kind of sucked, actually. It looks safe here. I know you didn't get hit.
A bubbling little basket of excitement and energy and emotion, and, I'm like, I almost screwed up, but I didn't. I did a good job, and now Dan Runte's over here busting my balls about it in a good-natured, and that was the biggest confidence boost you could have gave me, is if he'd have come over and been like, you idiot, why'd you do that? Instead, he recognized that I unscrewed myself enough to bring the truck back, and he's been there 1,000 times more and 1,000 times better and worse than anybody like me ever did. Those words are just echoing in my ears and in my brain now, and I think about, and I'm going to ramble a little bit more here, and I'm so sorry, guys, but I talked about it on Crush This with Brad and Cheech a couple weeks ago about the San Diego SST, where I ran over Dan's truck with 14, just rolled the back tire of 14 across the roof of 18. Dan was not in any legitimate danger in that particular moment. There could have been opportunities for more severe danger or injury or something like that had things gone a little bit differently. So go check out that show if you want to hear the whole story. But what I can tell you is I've never been more just disappointed in a moment and in a situation. And also, quite frankly, Looker, you mentioned earlier about being your own worst critic behind the wheel. I was really upset when I pulled out of that stadium and I knew I'd run Dan over. And I think he left the stadium before I did. I don't remember. But anyways, I get up to the pits and I am hot. And I've never thrown a helmet. And I don't drive anymore. And I never will again probably. So I'll never throw a helmet. But boy, I wanted to throw something when I got out of that truck. But I was also terrified because I was afraid of how mad Dan was going to potentially be at me. And what that would do to affect our friendship at the time or whatever our professional relationship was. And I could hear him bellering, over there by his truck when we parked in the pits up in the parking lot. And I'm a hugely anxiety-prone person. I come from a childhood of high stress and high anxiety, and I've grown into that way through my adulthood. And I cannot wait till we have Tim Hall on later this year because I want everybody to see what a good person he is that they may not already know. But I will tell you, working for Tim and Mark when you're young in the early 2000s only made my anxiety problems worse. And so I put all that on myself. I get out of the truck. I'm almost just crumbling from fear and anxiety and just disappointment and just broken spirit. And Dan came over and he's like, "Are you all right, dude?" And I'm like, "Am I all right? You're the one with tire tracks on the roof of your truck." And I know he wasn't happy, but he was not directing his anger towards me, and he's trying to calm me down. He's like, "Well, you got fast loser." I'm like, I'm not running again. And I turned in my fast loser card, so to speak. I didn't even run again. I was like, F this, man. I said it on Crush This. I'm not mad at anybody or blaming anybody, but that was kind of the day, even though I ran a bunch more shows for months to come, that was kind of the day, the interest in being a monster truck driver died inside me. Because how do you kind of worship the ground this guy races on, walks on, and he's such a good fucking person, and that's just it. What else do you need to know? He's Dan Runte. And then I ran him over. Essentially, I ran the truck over with mine, and that was a level of danger or interference that didn't need to happen. And I tell you what, I was looking inside myself a lot and thinking, like, if I've ever made a post on Monster Mayhem criticizing Monster Jam running one truck over another while there's people on board, I now currently have no room to effing talk because I just did it. Now, granted, it's a whole other situation and style of competition and everything, but at the end of the day, there's tire tracks on the roof of Bigfoot 18, and they belong to my truck. I felt like an idiot. I was mad at the people that put us in that situation. I was mad at myself for not being a better racer and trying to get ahead further than where I was to where that couldn't have happened and the timing wouldn't have lined up, but that's on me. And I did that to Dan's truck, and I just think about, like, how about everybody out there? How much do you want a monster truck tire to be just a little bit above your head, and all you have is a helmet and a little piece of fiberglass? We didn't run like a roof, containment panel or anything on those trucks back then. So I'm sorry for that long ramble, but Dan could have had every right to just fucking waylay me at that point in time, and he didn't. And that's just really heavy with me, guys. I mean, in the worst of moments, he could still be just the absolute class act that you always hoped he would be.
Yeah, the moments that you no, that was good to hear that perspective. I know in my professional life in different aspects, the times where you're shown grace by somebody that through all accounts
Doesn't need to show it.
What's that?
Doesn't need to show it.
Yeah. The times that you should be throttled verbally, emotionally by somebody because you know you deserve it, you know you screwed up, and they show you grace. Those are defining moments in your professional and honestly your mental capacity, because you realize that, okay, maybe this was okay. The guy that should be mad is not. And not only is this okay for me, but what a great individual that this guy is, or girl, you know what I mean? And those moments are what really stick with you throughout your life, is the feeling that you have going up to them, knowing I really screwed up, and then them not making it worse, basically, is what it comes down to.
Yeah, and I mean, I just ran out of talent, right? Like, I was not as smooth as somebody like Dan that could judge how to hit the big double jump and not go overboard, right? I hit it like a Monster Jam driver. It's fucking and sent it. Because I'm like, I'd rather deal with a tight run out of space landing on the other end that hurts a little, and it hurt a lot, than not clear this gap and, catch the rear end or something like I'm not going to pussyfoot it over the ramp is what I'm going to say. So getting over that and then landing, and the truck wanting to get a little out of shape, and 14 was fighting front shock and front steering problems that weekend. Those aren't excuses, but those excuses were exacerbated by my choice to go so hard off the big double. And so then as I circle around to jump the small double, which was my finish line, Dan's already launched off his double for the final time, which was his finish line. And, of course, I go over him crossing my finish line as he passes under me. And if you watch my onboard footage, you can see my truck, kind of wiggle in the air a little bit from the contact. And what I should have done is immediately recognized when I kind of botched the final turn that, hey, I'm not going to make it anywhere near a competitive finish against Dan. I should let him, get really close to the over-under part and then just and send it off that last jump and just be cool like Dennis Anderson. I know I lost the race, but I'll just send it. But instead, I'm like, it's Dan Runte, and I guess the only thing I did right that night was still trying to be competitive, but I didn't need to be. And so, I blame some other things for putting us in that situation, but I had to own that in the moment. I don't think I did as good a job as I should have been in the moment owning it, but this isn't about me. It's about Dan. Like, the way Dan handled all of that, and then he still goes out and I think wins the damn race, such as what you could call that stuff, if you could call it racing. But, yeah. So, I don't know, boys. This is catharsis, I guess, as much, or it's like being in a confessional booth or something and getting these appreciations out for Dan that, maybe we haven't talked enough about over the years or things like that. But what a hell of a guy, and I'm sure I'm not the only person. I bet there is a line of people, certainly ones that accomplished more than I did driving, that have stories about Dan like that, where he's helped them out in a pinch or a tough spot, or maybe some tough love instead of tough discipline was what got those people through there and made something better out of them. I just can't say how thankful I am, for. He just wasn't bothered by it. That dude had seen so much shit that was like bothered me for weeks, and he was like, "Dude, you got to move on. Like, whatever, buff the rubber off the roof and carry on." That's just the kind of guy he was,
Hell yeah, man.
Well, as we start to wrap up the Roundtire discussion here, fully recognizing we're going to be thinking of Dan Runte related stories and topics throughout the entire season. Because how could you not, right? There's no way tonight we could wrap up, whatever it is, 35 some odd years of his career in any kind of semblance, with an 8-minute, 10-minute video and an hour and whatever minutes talking about him. But, Justin, I'd like to start with you, and then I'll go to Matt. Just want to see if you guys had any, parting thoughts or messages, memories, anything you'd like to share as we start to wrap up this side of this show.
Nah, man, like I said, from the fan point of view, he gave us so many moments to cheer for. And, even still, even with your story with the trucks and everything, and you said you think he went on to win. Of course he did. Of course he did. Is fucking Dan Runte. But, like I said, from everything from Bigfoot Power Wheels to the long jumps, to the cool races at Rocky Mountain and the back to school bash. Penda, did he run? I think did he run USA as well? USA Motorsports?
Definitely, yep.
I say, yeah, Penda, USA, the early days of Monster Jam, all that stuff. There's a library there just to the man himself. And he always gave it his all. He was always gracious with his time. Great man.
Well said. Looker, any parting thoughts here?
I don't know if I said it before, but I'll say it again. Just one of the few guys that really bridged the old school and the new school. I mean, a competitive force to be reckoned with in the early 90s. And then up until the late 20-teens, the dream team, as I called it, of him and Larry Swim being the two Bigfoot trucks on the toughest tour. I still stand by as that would be really hard to top a 2-truck team at a series. Just how do you can't give him any more accolades than what he's already done, but carrying the sport through 30 years? Yeah. Through 30 years of being one of the top shoes in that field in one of the top teams. Because like we were saying before, it's one thing to be a top driver. It's another thing to carry a top team's name week in and week out and hold that as the number one team that weekend. Just one of the best. A legend is really an understatement.
Very well said, my friend. Dan, in my mind, and in a lot of people's minds, and I think Bob Trent at Bigfoot would probably be a great person to ask the same question or offer the same statement to. But I think Dan learned a lot from guys like Jim Kramer and Ron Bachman on how to be an ambassador, to embody the Bigfoot brand, to put the sport on his shoulders and not just the team. And Dan has truly taken Bigfoot around the world like those guys did. He's been in movies and TV commercials and special appearances and all kinds of things that most monster truck teams aren't asked to do and will never have the chance to take a part in. And he's had to carry all that kind of stuff on his shoulder. And then when the lights go off and the cameras are put away and the scripts get thrown in the trash and it's time to move on, he's still the son of a bitch taking the tires off, putting the truck away, firing up the rig, and then driving to whatever the next thing is. And I wish I could have made it through my time in the sport with a fraction of the achievements and dignity that Dan made it through, in his time there. So, that's kind of the lasting image I have of Dan, is just like I said about Ron Bachman last year. He was more than just a driver or an employee of a team. He was an ambassador, not just for Bigfoot, but for the whole sport. So yeah, I'm eternally thankful to Dan for the time he spent and wasted on me. I'm wrecked emotionally thinking about, when Cadence and I went back for the open house, and he had not seen Cadence probably since he held her as like a 4-pound baby before I left Bigfoot at the end of 2013. And so for Dan to see, one of my 2 pride and joys, but certainly my first attempt at being a dad, for him to meet the flagship of the fleet was pretty cool. So we love you, Dan. We love all the people in the Bigfoot family and all the fans that are experiencing the loss that we are right now. So Godspeed, Dan. Rest in peace. We'll see you next time on Bottom Dead Center. Thanks for watching. Sorry, guys.